Employees spill the secrets from Toys R Us's, and other big stores, last few months. Honestly, it was really just the usual things you'd expect from a well-known chain closing. We did things like mark down items, itemize, try to open up space. We all helped to get the property ready for potential buyers. Nothing major. Set up some barricades, repurposed the power wheels, and left in stock as fully equipped Humvees armed with turrets pulled up to take care of any of the straggler 4-year-olds who just wouldn't leave. You know, the usuals. A best friend told me a multitude of stories of the months leading up to their closing. They had go-kart races throughout the building and parking lot during closing hours the last week. Some people camped out on the roof 2 nights before closing as part of their last hurrah. This one lady came in to buy diapers and complained that even with the 40% price drop, that the diapers were still cheaper at Walmart. My best friend said, "Okay, go to Walmart then." She threw the diapers in his face and yelled at him. Many more stories, but most of them are just customers complaining. These are the more interesting ones. "Screw that. I'd pay to be able to say that kind of crap to a customer. All day long. F those customers. Great, it's cheaper there. Why are you telling me, and why are you frickin' here?" Went in on closing day and they were having a barbecue in the parking lot. I know a hardware store which does that every week at almost all of its dozen stores. I mean, it's considered un-Australian for our major hardware store, Bunnings, not to have a sausage sizzle every weekend. I worked for Toys R Us starting in May of 2017, and for this specific store, one of the first stores to close down, we rarely had any customers and mainly focused on trying to get people to sign up for credit card or rewards systems through us. The few customers we did have were usually grandparents. Also, we had to deal with a lot of theft. People would come in and take cartloads of stuff, and the policy is that we can't follow or confront them. For instance, this guy walked out with 3 $200 drones and nothing happened. I don't think we even called the police. We stopped caring. My last Toys R Us purchase was a Lego Star Wars BB-8, and I do recall that they pushed hard to get me to sign up for a credit card. I relented, mostly for the discount on the item. I promptly paid it off and have never used it since. Well, I can't imagine it would work much anymore, given that the store is closed. You ever notice how when a big chain is doing really bad, they start pushing for their credit cards? At least the ones that I've heard of who've done this. Take Sears, for example. If your work does this, it's time to start eyeing the exits. Well, my question is, how much stuff were you all stealing on the way out? I know someone that worked for Toys R Us a while ago. The guy had somewhere close to $10,000 worth of sealed Magic the Gathering stuff that was unopened. He only had it because he could. The store he worked at, everyone stole stuff from. Long lunches, crappier than usual customers, punching in for the day and going home, breaking down fixtures and trying to sell anything not nailed down. Nothing worth stealing, but some brooms, garbage cans and stuff went into the ether. I worked at Circuit City when they filed for bankruptcy. The customers were definitely worse then. I don't know how many times people yelled, "This is why you're losing your fricking job," when they were told no to something. It was met with an F you or the middle finger because, well, we're losing our jobs, so it doesn't matter. I rented Frozen from our local Extravision the week before it officially closed. I had to laugh at the guy behind the counter who said, "Alright, well, have that back by Tuesday. Or don't. The frick do I care." Worked at the Toys R Us headquarters. It was the best hire of my life at the time. I was so happy, it was like a childhood dream. I was there 2 years before the close, got hired to a lean team in marketing. 3 months in, we had the, "Oh hey, everything is screwed" global conference. I got let go a month later. So in the 4 months I was there, the problems were really obvious and it was really disheartening to want to be able to help and not being able to. The campus was gorgeous and I loved it. It was also down the street from my apartment, so that was awesome. I observed an interaction between an employee and an angry customer that probably sums up the experience. A woman was yelling at this younger male employee. She was with her young daughter, she bought a bunch of DVDs that were on sale, and she was screaming at this poor guy because she apparently couldn't do math and thought they were supposed to be cheaper. She wanted more of a discount after she had already bought them, and he was patiently trying to explain to her that he couldn't do that. The best part was when she screamed, "If you don't fix this, I'm reporting you to the Better Business Bureau." He just stared back at her and said, "Well, we're going out of business, so I don't know what that's going to accomplish." I love customers that can't math. I waited in line for 10 extra minutes at a basketball game because a family asked for 5 boxes of Bojangles Chicken Supremes. Mind you, at Bojangles, these are less expensive than a stadium. Everyone knows everything in stadiums costs more. This family was going bonkers because their Supremes cost around $40 for everything. They just refused to pay. They broke out the whole wanting to speak to the managers and you're gonna get fired thing. The poor teenage cashier broke out a calculator to show them step by step how their Supremes really did cost around $40. They were still angry and talking crap and saying they were gonna get the place closed down. Huh, my god. I worked in human resources in Toys R Us. You want a severance package? Well, we'd offer you toys. Did those toys come with a receipt so you could get a refund at the customer service counter? Are you kidding me? None at all. Just stuff in damaged boxes. Better than nothing, I guess. On a store level, the general goal is to liquidate all possible inventory. On corporate level, the general goal is to liquidate all possible assets like store fixtures and stuff. This happened at my local Borders. They were selling registers, counters, shelves, hooks out of the walls, printers, pens, desks, everything at a price. I hit up one of those Borders blowouts with my brother. It was one of the Borders with a Seattle's best coffee shop inside, and they had a counter for sale. And on the counter, they had this clunky-looking espresso machine. My brother asks a meandering employee for the cost, and the employee goes off to ask someone and then comes back and says it's $200. My brother says, $200 for a used coffee maker? This thing's worth $50 tops. The employee, who looks about 15 by the way, so beyond being an assumed-dead job, he was also just a bored teenager, shrugs and says 50's fine. My brother pays him in cash, no hint of any documentation by the way, and just goes with the kid to the register, who puts the money inside and we walk out hauling this espresso machine. My brother's pretty excited to have an espresso machine for his new place. Apparently the nice ones new in stores cost like $200, and we end up looking at the cost of our new piece of equipment online. So, this is an expensive piece of hardware. He sells it back to the manufacturer/distributor who refurbishes the models and walks away with over 15 grand. He ends up buying himself a $500 espresso machine with the earnings, so he talks about it as the time he got a $500 espresso machine for $50, and then the Borders threw in $14,500 at him as he was leaving. I heard from a cashier a story about how a little boy went to his store last week and heard about the store closing, and the boy told him that when he grows up and becomes successful, he'll rebuild Toys R Us exactly like it was. Pretty memorable story. As someone who went there periodically in the store's last few months, I can tell you it consisted of groups of employees just hanging out and having fun near the registers. When I was there in the last week, I would have sworn I interrupted a meeting of laughter just by walking in the door. Yeah, if it was anything like Circuit City when it went out of business, it was basically just getting paid to goof off and hang around. I mean, what are they going to do, fire you? And why would you care? Everyone is a, quote, manager, and everything you aren't allowed to say to rude customers in retail is finally said. My store held a meeting with everyone and swore up and down that we weren't one of the stores closing. According to the poor suckers who couldn't find work, management changed the locks and just didn't show up one day. Fortunately, I was already cynical and broken, so I jumped ship a week or two after that first meeting. I was a manager at one of the largest stores in the country. The last few months were extremely difficult. It's hard to manage a group of people who've just been told they'll be losing their jobs. We had a big rise in employee theft, and even more people just not showing up for work. What are we going to do, fire them? We actually had to hire a bunch of people after we announced bankruptcy because so many customers started coming into the stores. That being said, we did have a core team of dedicated staff that had been busting their butts every single day in the last few months. There was no possible way we could have gotten through that liquidation without them. They deserved all the credit in the world for what they had to put up with, and I couldn't be more proud of my team. On the last day when we packed up, I was really sad to see them all go. Honestly though, you can't fault the ones who goofed off or didn't really give their best for it. I mean, the ones who are doing their best are to be admired for sure, it's good loyalty to their friends at work, but in the sort of situation like Toys R Us was in, I would be on the cashier PCs browsing jobs. A friend told me he had a lady come in and ask if they were going to order more Legos, and he told her, no, we're closing soon. The lady then told him, you guys need to keep up on your inventory or you're going to go out of business. When she drives by next week, she'll be like, see, idiot, I told you so. You should have ordered my Legos. My wife took the kids there for one last time at the very end. As she was leaving, they were closing and they locked the doors behind her. This is the same Toys R Us I went to as a kid, and my kids were the last customers to walk out. It felt poetic. I worked at Toys R Us a few years ago, and I was recently added to a Toys R Us alumni page on Facebook. They invited anyone who'd ever worked there to a last day barbecue in the parking lot. From what I heard at the barbecue, the last days consisted of a lot of messing around, including basketball games in areas that were already cleared out, basically taking anything that wasn't sold on the last day, a ceremony when Jeffrey the giraffe was finally laid to rest, Nerf wars across the store, hiding anything a store member wanted to take home on the last day. Honestly, it wasn't a great job, but I did make a lot of great friends working there, and it was a very bittersweet feeling watching the last few kids walk out of the store before closing up for good. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? It's a little late for those who worked at Toys R Us, but if you find yourself in a similar position, look into the Workplace Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. It helps workers who are laid off or whose company has closed permanently, as well as those who are on unemployment, teen mothers and stuff, to get grants for training that can go towards a new career path. The criteria differs by state, so make sure to do some research. My company just closed its doors and I'm going through this process now. You can't get this if you already have another job, but for those who are between jobs, it could be a valuable asset to have while you're still searching. Until the store closing liquidations, I hadn't shopped at Toys R Us since I was a kid because it seemed like they were more expensive on everything. I don't know if that's true or not though. But now that it's gone, I have this weird sick feeling because of the memories I have from when I was a kid. I distinctly remember going there and buying my first toy with my own money, as in handing the cashier the pocket money myself. I feel like I let the store down or something. I'll miss it. Former corporate employee here. Most of the corporate workforce was told that they no longer needed to come into work within 2 to 3 weeks of the Chapter 7 filing. Those that stayed longer were mainly in certain finance or accounting functions which were directly involved in the liquidation. The few weeks of work before being sent packing basically turned into a giant job search support group. They even held a career fair with like 50+ companies at the HQ. It was very strange having all of our competitors represented on campus. Objectively speaking, it's a real shame what happened. There were a lot of very intelligent people who worked there, and I think there's a fair amount of misinformation about what caused the collapse. As someone who interviewed at several other profitable retail companies, we were years ahead of them in regards to many aspects of our strategy and systems. Unfortunately, Toys R Us just didn't have the resources necessary to enact the changes it needed. I miss my old team, but we're all doing just fine, albeit at different companies. Toys R Us now joins Suncoast, Walden's Books, Anchor Blue, Circuit City, and Mervyn's. And by now, I mean 7 years ago. I worked while a student in a high-end furniture store that went out of business in the UK. Over the final days, I took home a lot of those decorative filler pieces, like the random old books, the chrome airplane models and stuff. The general manager broke down and just chewed out a customer. The guy did the, "If it doesn't scan, it must be free," while she was working register, and got, "Oh, just frickin' take it, I don't give a crap anymore, so please just F off and take it. I'm done with this. 10 years and all I get from corporate is an F off and good luck, so just go." By the end, nobody cared. We were printing off copies of our CVs on the store printer and generally doing as little work as possible. I used to have this coworker at my annual summer job. Last year, she told me how she left her job as a regional manager for KFC to be a store manager at Toys R Us. They were going to pay her more, and it was also closer to home for her. I know she has 2 kids. It consisted of moving merch closer to the front door as things were selling out, making new sale signs every day, dealing with increasingly annoying customer questions, a lot of cleaning and breakdown of all shelves, hanging out with your coworkers and laughing because it's not like they're going to fire you, and then realizing how much that store has meant to you for the last 10 years of your life and having a breakdown as they lock the doors for the last time. Honestly, some of the most fun I've ever had at that store was the last couple of weeks there, goofing off more than we ever have, doing all the things we weren't supposed to do and reminiscing about pastimes and employees. We held a makeshift funeral when we packed Jeffrey the giraffe up for the last time. I actually kind of missed that place, that's for sure. The store I worked at was one of the first to start liquidating. We were completely cleared out in April, and thank God for that. That place was an absolute nightmare by the end of it. A daily crowd that rivaled Black Friday with half the staff of that event. Typically, it was just one floor worker and a manager who'd be in charge of helping guests with whatever they needed. So my shifts were absolutely exhausting with all of the manual labor I'd end up doing. By the end, I stopped caring about what people thought of me or my customer service. One lady told me I was incredibly rude for not looking in the back for a toy that had been sold out for years. "I'll be speaking to your manager about this." "Oh yeah? What are they going to do? Fire me?" That was our daily business, getting screamed at by penny-pinching rednecks and junkies who needed to stock up on the cheapest bunch of crap. People watching just got sad after a while. There was constant shoplifting. Overall, it was one of the most miserable experiences I've ever had. I only stayed on staff because I knew it would just be harder for everyone else if I quit. I met some decent people there, but I'm happy that my first retail experience is over. man, I didn't realize this place closed as late as 2018, and the experiences honestly seem to range from more or less positive and bittersweet to it being people's personal Vietnam. I don't know what to make of that. Does it depend on how good your manager was and how crappy the people were in your state? I worked there right up until the end as well, except for the last day because I just couldn't take it anymore. I'll miss my co-workers, but not the manager. He was a dillweed of colossal proportions, making female employees uncomfortable, and even was caught with one of them. HR did nothing about it, so I wish the worst for him and for them. I was with a Kmart store that closed in December 2014. It was very bittersweet for me personally. It was my first job. I'd worked there for 7.5 years, worked my way up from stock person to eventually assistant manager. However, it was a lot of fun, almost therapeutic to tear down your workplace. Someone externally came in and guided us through liquidations. At first it was the merchandise, eventually it was the fixtures, and basically anything that wasn't bolted down to the ground. Every day moving stuff forward. The last hour, everything was 99% off, but it was all junk. Once we closed the doors, a small team stayed for 2 more weeks to clean and got rid of what didn't sell. We leased the building, so we had to have it pretty empty even though it was clearly going to be torn down. Overall, the mood was pretty relaxed, but there were tears on the last day. I know this sounds lame, but I took a weird sense of pride being the last person to walk out and lock up the building one final time. I worked at Toys R Us in Australia, which was in the process of liquidating and closing their doors. Working mostly involved keeping the store looking stocked, even though no stock was coming in, and recovering shelves. There was a large influx of people every time some news came out, so the store could get pretty trashed. Certain customers seem to have a "the store is closing anyway" mentality when it comes to shopping. I worked for corporate. The last months consisted of just trying to get everyone prepared to look for a new job. I was a video producer and photographer. Some team members had been there their entire lives, so for 3 days I offered to take professional pictures for every team member to use on LinkedIn. It was the best way I could help with my skills. We also held a career fair in the office and the distribution centers. The last thing I created was a video montage for our final goodbye. We used it on our store pages as our final piece of media. Toys R Us is still going strong in some other countries, like Canada. Well, that's a pretty big sign of global warming. Giraffes are migrating to Canada. My wife worked for Blockbuster when they finally closed down. She stocked a box behind the counter with movies that we wanted and video games that I wanted. We ended up getting like 50 movies and 5 video games for $30. At a Radio Shack that was closing. For the first few weeks it was business as usual, like any sale, but better deals. Then they told us that nobody was being transferred and everyone was getting fired, including my manager, a 36-year-old newlywed who had worked for the company since she was 18. We smoked in the store with customers there and put them out on the carpeted floors. They couldn't replace us, so we were untouchable. It was depressing but awesome in a way. That was a long time ago. One of my old managers actually passed away in like 2018. He had been royally screwed by the first bankruptcy. I heard his retirement was gone, but he stayed until pretty much the end. I do miss their battery deals and the convenience of going to get charging or audio cables. Well, I can tell you from my store closing, everyone gets lazier and lazier and lazier and meaner, and customers get more entitled. It's frickin' bullcrap and I walked out. F them. Oh, and that one guy that literally asked for my opinion on a game and then instantly said, "I don't want to hear your story," and then waved me off as he walked away. F you personally, dude. I worked at a different bankrupt store for the summer, but I think the experience is a bit similar. We were making a lot of new discount signs just about every day to reflect the constantly dropping prices. We don't have to check in the back for anything because all of our products are already on the floor. People ask for price checks even when it's half off or the discounted price is clearly printed nearby, and then complain about how expensive it is. I've only been there a few weeks, so I don't have the same attachment to the store that some people did at the end of Toys R Us, but the people who'd been there longer than I have, for the most part, jumped ship to find work elsewhere. It was weird when a guy walked by with both of the mannequins from the lingerie section deconstructed in a cart. I don't know how much those cost him. You can also buy the tables. My sister worked at Toys R Us. During her final months, it consisted of huge crowds of people who were waiting in line for the huge discounts, selling shelves to another company, and her alcoholic manager whining at the employees. There was lots of sobbing and weeping for her co-workers because they couldn't get another job after that one. I got let go after Christmas 2017, but my friend still worked there and I came in to help sometimes when she was the only one in the store basically. That last few months had a very scary screw it attitude, so much so that they trusted an ex-employee, me, to run our zone, electronics, and handle top dollar crap. I probably could have walked out of there with an Xbox and a crap ton of games without my old manager saying a word. Also, once the store closed for the night, literally everyone just screwed around. Stuff got broken, people rode the heavy item cart thingies and jousted in the aisles with them. That was great. What was the worst experience you had in elementary school? I was running around the playground, saw a couple of girls with a small milk carton between them, ran through and kicked it. Turns out they had a pet hamster or squirrel in it. I killed the pet right in front of them. I felt bad about that for my whole life, and I'm 54 now. My father did that. I'd just gotten a hamster and it was rolling around in one of those balls while we put the cage together. He came home from work and thought I got a sports ball or something and happily kicked it at me. I got a new hamster. Wanna play sports ball, son? Why would someone put a hamster inside a milk carton? They're just kids. They wanted to carry it around and figured that'd be fine. I was bullied a lot and also had a bad haircut. One day in class, all of us students were sitting in a line while the teacher spoke. Halfway through, the teacher stopped talking. He walked up to me and pulled on my hair, saying, "Is this for real?" He then erupted with laughter, and so did the rest of the class. As they all laughed at me, I felt mortified. I wanted to die. I will never forget that moment. I had terrible, terrible hair throughout my childhood at all different stages. And I had this happen in various situations where the teacher would add to how terrible it was by constantly questioning my hair and bringing attention to it during class in front of the other classmates. They allowed me to be constantly bullied by my classmates in front of them without doing a darn thing. I remember when I was in the 4th grade, my mum gave me my brother's lunch by accident. I asked if I could go to his classroom so we could swap. I knocked on the door and asked for him. At the time, I had very short, curly hair. My mother made me get it all cut off as I had head lice that she couldn't get rid of. I'm female. After I asked for him, a little boy asked, "Are you a girl or a boy?" The entire class erupted with laughter and pointed at me, most loudly the teacher, who was in hysterics. He just kept laughing too. I walked out and waited for my brother to come while I could hear them in the background. It was mortifying. Another time, my mum took me to a clothes shop where she knew the owner. He invited me out back as his sons were there with their pet mice. I spent about 30 minutes with them and we went to leave and he said, "You have a lovely son." Oh well, I'm a somewhat attractive woman now and the teacher who laughed at me was fired for his inappropriate behavior with students later. Sometimes karma is slow for people who have a rough time in school, if it happens at all. Glad things worked out for this nice lady. In 2nd grade, we sat at desks arranged in groups of 4 with 2 pairs of desks facing each other. I was grasping the front edge of the desk and this kid slammed his desk against my fingers. Not sure if it was intentional, but it really hurt. I started crying. The teacher noticed and instead of dealing with the situation in a sane way befitting a 2nd grade teacher, her punishment for the boy was to have me slam my desk against his fingers. I told her it was okay because what the frick, I really didn't want to do that, but she made me do it anyway. She was a terrible teacher. Damn, that's pretty effed up and traumatizing for a 2nd grader. What happened to her? Is she still around? I remember her being pretty old, so she's probably retired or dead by now. I loaded my pants in kindergarten. Then I stepped on it. Then I proceeded to walk it around the classroom. When asked if I did it, I denied the act even though the footprints led to me and my pants smelled pretty bad. I got sent home. Many of those kids probably don't remember, but some nights I lie in bed thinking about what might have been if I just went to the bathroom. I work in an elementary school now. A few years ago, one of the kindergarten teachers pulled me aside and told me, "I have a pooper in my class. I can't figure out who it is." Somehow, someone who didn't wear underwear with their pants was relieving themselves, and the logs were falling out of the leg pants and onto the floor. This was causing her stress because some kids would accidentally step in it and shred it around the classroom, making a mess. A few days later, the teacher was walking down the hall and catches my eye. She seemed less stressed than the previous couple of days. She came over to me and said, "So, I found the poopatrator today." It was as if he had no idea he was doing it. In other words, your experience isn't unheard of. I got really sick once. My mother sent me to school despite the fact that I felt awful. I walked into the bathroom, spewed all over the floor, and then proceeded to crap my pants. I locked myself in a stall until the teacher came, cleaned me up, and brought me to the nurse. One day as a child, I woke up feeling sick. Mum sends me to school anyway. I get there, immediately go to the nurse's office. They refuse to examine me without a pass from my teacher. I go across the building to my first class to get one, by which point I'm late. The teacher refuses to let me into the room without a pass from the principal's office. I go back across the building, spend a few minutes waiting in a crowd of fellow late students, go back to class, give teacher his pass, go back to the nurse's office, give nurse her pass, nurse examines me, immediately declares me highly contagious, and sends me back home. You're a lucky mother fricker. My mom forced me to go to school and I was sick with the flu. I felt sick and in the middle of class I silently threw up on my desk. I covered it for 15 minutes. When class ended, everyone left and the teacher confronted me, asking me what was wrong. I raised my head to have spew coming off my face and shirt. She starts gagging and I ran for the bathroom, leaving trails of spew. Worst day ever. There's one story that will always stick in my mind. I was in the 3rd grade and we were supposed to bring back signed permission slips from our trip to the library. The only person in class who didn't bring his permission slip was a friend of mine. My 3rd grade teacher thought it'd be appropriate to interrogate him in front of the entire class as to why he didn't bring it. He responded that he would be unable to attend and she continued to press him. All of a sudden, he bursts into tears and explains that he has to attend a funeral. You'd think she'd have the brains to stop there, right? Wrong. She still has the nerve to ask, whose? I'll never forget the look on his face when he replies, my mum's. I freaking hated that teacher so much for so many other reasons too. He moved about a week after that and his father got in contact with our family, updating on their status, which wasn't exactly great. That was my worst experience. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for him. Oh gosh, this reminds me of a story. I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten through to the 6th grade. In the 3rd grade, 8, one of my friend's mothers died. Needless to say, the kid was out of school for a couple of weeks. When he finally returned, he was having a difficult time, obviously. One day during class, he was crying, and our female teacher told him to stop being such a baby and that his mother was no good anyways. I recall telling my mother about it because it really disturbed me at that age. Heck, it disturbs me now. I'm sorry, Paul. I hope you're doing great. I called my teacher Mom. I then tried to correct myself and referred to her as the names of several other teachers before shutting up and trying to phase into my chair. Haha, I as well called my teacher Mom once. Luckily it was the beginning of recess and most kids were hurrying to get outside, so most of them didn't hear it. Plus I was 5, almost 6, and super tiny for my age, which according to my teacher made my mistake the cutest thing ever. She even picked me up when the rest of the kids were outside. I was so flustered by my mistake that I hadn't even moved, and she said she wished she was my mom. She was a pretty cool teacher. I feel like this happens to greater than 1/3 of students, just by this cliché's appearance in media and how often you hear about it happening in general from your friends. Had a teacher tell me I was a slacker when all I wanted to do was mind my own business. She constantly took me out into the hall because I wasn't talking as much as I should, and lectured me how I was disturbing everyone else. Even had my parents come in at one point. Sorry I was a quiet kid, lady. So you were disturbing people with your silence. Yeah, I even burst into tears at one point. I didn't know what I was doing wrong and this lady didn't let up. It scarred me. I always go with the whole, we're worried about you, you don't ask as many questions as the other kids thing. Of course I was quiet, and I'd always think that the reason you ask questions in class is because you don't understand something. I understood everything as a child. Turns out they just wanted me to outwardly express a bit more interest. There was this lady at my school who taught special ed, who was a typical scary-faced witch. One day she took us to indoor recess, our normal teacher couldn't take us for some reason, and I was skipping happily like a normal child would do. She immediately scolds me and says that I can't play in recess. I had to sit in a chair in the corner of the gym while I watched all of my friends play some weird game. After the first round of the game was over, I got to go play with them because I assumed that my punishment wasn't as severe as sitting out the whole time. Nope, I was yelled at and told to sit back down. For skipping, like the happy child that I was. We had a teacher like that too. She was the special ed principal as well. She told lots of kids off for fast walking and made everyone sit for an extra 10 minutes at lunch so the owner of a chip packet would pick it up and scolded a kid who tried to pick it up and end the madness, and had to have the principal of the regular school tell her to wear a better brassiere. She was horrible and scary. Speech therapy. The kids in my grade level were pretty cool and didn't make fun of me for having a speech impediment. I was actually well liked. I only felt different during speech therapy. Nothing felt worse than when your teacher is standing in front of the class and the speech therapist has to interrupt the lesson to take you, and only you, out of the class. This happened on a weekly basis, mind you. I say this for all school-based speech-language pathologists. I'm so sorry for ever making you feel anything less than brilliant. We think we're helping. I try to take students from the same class out at the same time to make it seem more natural. Also, I try to make the sessions interesting and rewarding, so I hardly ever have a student who doesn't want to go to speech. Unless the class is in the middle of something new and super cool, then I engage in the activity with the class for a bit until there's a better stopping time. I've actually had 2 students fake having a trouble with a certain sound just so that they could see what speech was all about. However, no one can pull students out of the classroom at random, so their adorable attempt at getting out of class went unsuccessfully. Again, sorry for any hard feelings. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I didn't speak good English when I first moved to the US in 3rd grade. I didn't know that frick was a swear word. I used it casually. One time the teacher asked, "Who first settled the town that I live in?" I responded, "The fricking British." I got suspended for 3 days. Pro tip, before moving to another country, learn which words are offensive and don't say them to your teacher. Your suspension seems pretty harsh for a new kid. That's a solid answer though, and you should stand by it. That's hilarious. I actually did something similar in 3rd grade. Having just moved to France, I asked in a rude way if I could go and take a leak. Je peux aller pisser? Not knowing that pisser was a swear word. I didn't get suspended or anything, but everyone in the class got a good laugh out of it. Some of my friends still bring it up now, about 12 years later. This butthole kid stabbed me in the shoulder with a metal fork during a snowball fight. Who brings a knife to a snowball fight? Only a lunatic, but a fork? It's understandable. I see you've played snowy, spoony, knifey, forky before. My mother sent me to school very sick one day, and I was having a horrible time to say the least. Nauseous, fever, cough, but I couldn't stay home as she had a very important job interview, so I pretended I was a lot better than I was for her. About half an hour into school, I got this feeling in the pit of my stomach. Oh God. I proceeded to walk over to where everyone kept their backpacks, where nobody could see me, found the nearest one, and filled it with my spew. I was a dumb kid, so I looked around to make sure no one saw. The storage was around the corner from the class desks, and they were having playmat time so nobody noticed me, and I put the poor kid's backpack back on its hook. 2 hours later during lunch, I heard a scream, followed by a couple of students getting sick all over the lunchroom tables and floor. And that boy whose bag I spewed in was crying his fricking eyes out. The teacher basically interrogated the class, and I finally burst into tears and admitted it was me. I was sent to the nurse, then detention, and my mother never looked so angry with me when she picked me up. As for the kid, he didn't talk to me for 2 weeks and then told me he hated me and that my spew smelled like his cat's litter box. We started dating 8 years later, and we're still together. Ha ha ha! In this more negative story grouping, it can be quite nice to come across the odd one that has a happy ending, so thanks for that. 3rd grade, we had chair desks. Look them up. Mine had a lot of clutter under the seat, and the teacher told me to clean it before class was over. Now, I wasn't going very fast, but I didn't have much time either. The bell rang and I was still cleaning. The teacher got really angry at me. I don't remember what she said, but she was mad. Really furious. She picked up the whole desk, I fell out, and she dumps everything out of it and onto me, then throws it down. The desk slammed into the ground inches to my side. Needless to say, I was terrified by this whole thing. I told my mum told the principal, and they called the police. But I was too scared to say a word to the officers. I just bawled into my mum's arm. With nothing from me, there wasn't much they could do. At least I was moved to a different class. My 1st grade teacher also used to dump students' desks, sometimes with students still in them, out as well. She was a C-word. I'm sorry you had to experience this too. I will never understand why people like that decide to work with children if they hate them so much. Some of them just don't know they hate children until they've spent a decade teaching them. Okay, so my 1st grade teacher was a total butthead who was constantly doing things that probably should have gotten him fired, like telling the entire class that they should never be like me and using my art project as an example of what everyone shouldn't do, singling me out, openly mocking me, and my family in front of class. forcing me to go to a kindergarten class so he could use me as a bad example there, among other things. I'm almost positive that he hated me. The worst thing, though, happened one day during our math time. I was in the advanced math class and had already learned what we, as a class, were doing on a worksheet. Because of this, I worked ahead and finished it before the other kids. This prompted him to take my sheet, scream at me for working ahead of the class or not paying attention, violently rip up my worksheet, throw it to the garbage, and make me start over. It was more humiliating than anything up to that point, and the only time I'd ever been punished for being smart. In conclusion, my first grade teacher was literally a walking, talking sphincter. My teacher did something similar to me in 6th grade. I went to a private Christian school that was known for being less academically advanced than the other schools in the area, and I was pretty far ahead of a lot of the people in my grade. I also had ADHD, diagnosed but untreated, so during lectures I'd get bored and quietly work ahead. The teacher caught me one day and ripped up my work in front of the class in the middle of her lecture. I told my mom and the teacher ended up getting fired. Sort of a last straw deal, I guess. Good riddance. Frick you, Mrs. Myers. I remember another time I was reading after finishing my work, and she confiscated my book and made some sort of snide comment about it. She was mad that I wasn't double-checking my work. I ended up going to the principal and he got it back from me since Mrs. Myers refused to give it up until the end of the week, even though it was a library book. Oh my god, frick you, Mrs. Myers again. I had long hair in kindergarten or 1st grade, I can't quite remember, but a kid used to always tease me about it, saying I looked like a girl. I'm a dude. Anyway, I dragged him out into our little cubby space in class and gave him a haircut with safety scissors. The old ones cut hair pretty well. Got in a ton of trouble. By the way, if you lived in Las Vegas 20 years ago, and this was you, my bad. You don't lie about those scissors. When I was really young and coloring in class, I think this was in kindergarten, I was getting annoyed at my hair for falling in my face, so I just grabbed the safety scissors and gave myself bangs. According to the teacher, I did a really good job at them too. When I was a kid, I was sloppy and disorganized. It wasn't on purpose. I just for some reason felt compelled to shove papers in my desk at school rather than sort them out. I was embarrassed by it and didn't want anyone to look at my desk. Like all kids, I had a crush. My crush that year was a kid named Johnny. I wrote his name in my notebook with little hearts all around it, and it became part of the mass of crumpled up papers in my desk that I'd forgotten about. One day, in the middle of class, my evil witch of a teacher noticed that my desk was sloppy, again, and decided to embarrass me by dumping out all of the contents of my desk right in front of the entire class, and then going through all of the papers one by one and reading them out loud. Eventually, she came across the paper that had Johnny's name written on it and said, "Ah, looks like someone has a crush on Johnny," out loud to the entire class. I turned bright red and tried to take the papers out of her hand, which apparently offended her, so she told me to get my hands off her. Kids never stopped teasing me after that. I couldn't even look at Johnny without blushing and wanting to cry. Fricking hate that B-word to this day. A group of boys who were a few years older than me, I was 6 and they were 12, would relentlessly chase me around the school every lunchtime. I'd hide in the toilets until I was sure they got bored of waiting. I told teachers, but they never did anything. Honestly, I lived in fear of them all year until they left for high school. They were double my age and like 3 times my size. It was horrible. Something similar happened with my little brother. He was in the 2nd grade and these 2 5th graders were cutting in line in front of my brother and his friends. My brother, knowing this is wrong, tells the 5th grader that they can't cut in line. Somehow, one of the 5th graders decides to hit my brother, and my brother hit him back, and they started fighting until a lunch lady stopped them. They both got a 3-day in-school suspension. If they hit you first, then you can hit them back in defense. Now that I think about it, this situation isn't that similar to yours, but oh well, I'm still sorry it happened to you. I wonder if bullying is more or less the same in the modern day and age compared to how it was when I, and the writers of these posts, were in school in the 90s or earlier. I can't help but feel like teachers have much stricter training on how to deal with this sort of thing in most countries now. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a crush on this one girl, and when we were on a field trip, I saw this ladybug ring for sale. I bought it knowing she liked ladybugs and waited for the right time to give it to her. I ended up doing it at the end of the field trip as we were gathering our stuff in front of her friends. She laughed in my face and refused the gift. I felt like crap and threw it out. In the 1st grade, I went to this private church school where all of the teachers were relatively strict about rules, and kids leaving class to go to the restroom among other things. One day, during singing time, I really had to go pee. I asked the teacher politely if I could use the restroom real quick and promised to be right back. The teacher told me I'd have to wait until recess to use it. Recess was right after singing time. While singing time is going on, a giant thunderstorm moves in and begins a torrential downpour, while the teacher thinks it would be a great idea for the class to sing the rainy day song to coincide with the storm. As the class is singing the song, I try as hard as I can not to think about how badly I need to pee and begin trying to count the grains of wood in my desk. Needless to say, it didn't help. About halfway through the rainy day song, and when the torrential downpour outside was at its worst, I ended up peeing my pants and creating a giant pool of pee beneath my desk. I was in tears, and when the teacher noticed what had happened, I was immediately taken down to the office to get a change of clothes. Since I was a girl and happened to be wearing a dress that day, I ended up having to wear some Polynesian top meant for a boy and boy shorts. My 4th grade teacher would always ridicule me in front of the class for not being able to learn my multiplication tables. I'm dyscalculic. I hated 4th grade so much. It was a nightmare. I crapped my pants while doing a speech in front of the class. My teacher had not one sympathetic bone in her body and treated me as if I'd punched her elderly mother in the face. I was a bathroom monitor with my friend. He took the boy one, I had the girl one, and they were obviously next to each other. We were just talking and messing around, and at one point I jokingly held his shoulders for whatever reason, and this teacher starts screaming down the hall for me to let go of him, what am I doing, etc. I also had the meanest 1st grader teacher who didn't believe that I wasn't bullying him, and kept demanding that I do to her what I did to him to prove it. I still freaking hate both of those teachers. My kindergarten teacher changed my card from green to yellow because I tugged at another girl's t-shirt to tell her that I thought it was pretty. I've got to be honest, I flipped out like SpongeBob did in that one episode where he got a good noodle star taken away. Massage therapists and customers, what was your strangest experience during the process? I'm a male companion for hire and give special massages. My prices are very high compared to a regular massage, and no one can really mistake what you're buying. Also, the website I advertise on is full of undressed buff dudes, so there's really no confusion. Well, one day I receive a call from a man asking if I'm available. He said he'd like a massage at his office in the middle of downtown. I didn't think much of this as I've done this kink for a few people before. They normally run a small business and nobody is there at that time of night. Innocent enough. But this guy requested it to be at lunch and gave me the address to a bustling building. When I arrived, it was filled with people in a beautiful open space office. I brought my massage table and people were making light conversation with me thinking I'm a legit masseuse. This was way out of my comfort zone. I'm used to dealing with pervy guys in dim-lit rooms, not talking to Karen and her friends interested in booking a massage. When I finally met the guy, he led me through to a maze of people and departments. Everyone was staring as I was dressed like a man-ho, while everyone else was in business attire. Tank top, grey sweats, and no underwear. Gotta dress the part, you know? He leads me to an open room that had been converted into a massage area, meaning there's no doors, just a paper curtain divider that blocks the view from his co-workers. I started the massage and was thinking, he can't possibly think I would do anything here, right? This is insane. After 30 minutes, I get a sense that something is off. I'd glide my hands to more intimate areas, but he keeps talking casually. Most guys would pop a tent, or ask to be massaged near their groin, or start touching my junk. But he was talking about his wife and daughters. I immediately asked him how he found out about me. He told me it was a recommendation from one of his friends, then started going on about his relationship with this guy and how they have a very strong friendship and that they would constantly prank each other. I froze and my heart dropped. This guy thinks this is a legit massage. This was supposed to be a prank that somehow got way too advanced without any party knowing. Hence why I'm in the middle of a tech office and he's so nonchalant about everything. I immediately went real masseuse and focused on his knots for the remainder of the time. He paid me my ridiculous fee and made a small comment about it being expensive for a massage, but it was good and convenient. I was beyond terrified as I was seconds away from doing some highly inappropriate things to this man right in the middle of his office, feet from his co-workers. This is my most eerie experience I've had yet. What's the strangest experience during the massage process? The one where the guy didn't try to do the deed with me. Did you level with him after and explain what you were actually there for? It seems like that would have been a great way to get an extra tip or something. I know I would have really appreciated knowing about that. No, I thought it might be way too embarrassing for him, especially at work. Instead, I really tried to give him the best massage possible and speak nothing of this. Until now. That is brilliant. I would have gently let him know at the end, or perhaps the client, blissfully unaware, recommended this gentleman onward at his usual rates and everyone profited. Not a massage therapist, but my dad is, and this is one of his favorite stories. When his clients come in, he gives them a list of Pandora stations to choose from for the session. A client comes in one day and picks 50s jazz, so like Ella Fitzgerald and stuff. The thing about some of these women from the 50s, some of their songs were not so subtly raunchy. One comes in and it's about a woman asking her lover when he's coming home, but she's singing lines like, "When are you gonna come? I can't wait for you to come. Come for me, baby. I love it when you come for me." He's in the middle of working on this woman's glutes when the song comes on and pauses to see if she's awake. She hasn't said anything for a while, so he figures she's just gone to sleep. It's a pain to stop what he's in the middle of working on, walk over to the phone and wipe all the massage oil from his fingers just to skip the song, so he makes a mental note to remove it from the playlist and keeps working. A few minutes later, when the song reaches its climax of a woman begging her lover to come, his massage bottle runs out of oil. Not a problem, he always keeps a spare on his hip because this happens. The thing is, sometimes when the bottle is being filled up, a bubble of air gets caught in the tube inside and it comes out with the first pump. He goes to pump the oil into his hand, and a mixture of oil and air comes out with a loud splooge sound, like a cartoonish imitation of a man reaching completion. He freezes, one hand on the pump and the other on this woman's butt. She didn't react, so again he thinks she's probably asleep. Then her entire body starts shaking with laughter. They're both laughing so hard they need to take a break from the massage to compose themselves. Thank God she was chill and found it just as funny as he did. I had a very eccentric, read creepy as frick client who came into our clinic one day wanting a Tui Na massage, type of Chinese massage. We usually leave the room to let the clients strip down into underwear before we commence, but with this guy I had no chance to get away. Before I had time to give him the towel, he dropped his pants to reveal a sparkling blue G-string that barely kept everything in place. The guy was about 58, huge beer gut, grey hair, gold earrings, and hairy like Robin Williams. As I started the massage, the guy started to tell me that he worked as a bedroom masseuse specializing in body slide massage. This is where the masseuse gets oiled up and rubs his body and fun bits all over before doing the deed with the client at the end. The whole time I was massaging him, he kept telling me that I was really good with my hands. He also repeatedly told me how good he was at his job and plugging his business with a hinting tone. A very awkward session.
I enjoy a good butt massage, but I don't enjoy the amount of focus it takes to keep it at half-mast, at most for 90 minutes, instead of enjoying the massage so the undies stay on the bundies.
I'm a licensed massage therapist. Seriously, let yourself relax. We've seen it all and we don't judge. Yes, whenever I see this happen to someone, I might get a little excited too because we're all human. But because I'm a licensed massage therapist, it's my responsibility and profession to ignore all indecent but natural aspects and continue to focus on the fundamental muscles during the massage. We're all human. Massage is obviously a delicate topic, so when we establish the expectations and boundaries before the massage begins, everyone can feel safe and know exactly what will and won't happen. I can never do this relaxing thing. I always decline any glute and thigh workout out of guilt. There's no problem with that. Professionally trained licensed massage therapists will never touch you anywhere you don't want to be touched. We discuss the full parameters of the session before the session begins. No surprises, just relaxation. It's common to have difficulty relaxing, and that's why it's recommended to book a 90-minute or 120-minute massage, because people often don't begin to relax until 45 minutes into the session. This is a therapeutic human touch. It's safe, it's beneficial. Every human needs human touch, and the client has full control over everything. Massage therapists are professionally trained to respect every client, make you feel safe and comfortable, never do anything you don't want to do. I had a guy tell me, "Stop teasing, you know exactly what you're doing, don't start me up and not finish." Studying to be licensed, but I volunteer my services at a harm reduction clinic. From 7 through 9 p.m. I work at a massage palace as the receptionist. People used to come in all the time to ask how much massages were, and usually that was the extent of the conversation. One day a bloke walked in and asked how much the massages were, so I told him. Then he asked me in an overly friendly voice if I did the massages. I naively plowed on with, "No, not me, they're done by..." when my boss walked out of the consultation room he'd been in with a client and said, "I do the massages, can I help you?" The guy looked instantly sheepish and couldn't get out the door fast enough. My boss said he'd overheard the guy ask if I did the massages and knew something wasn't right. Told me that if that ever happened again, to just say I would get the masseur for him and walk out. I'm so glad your boss was awesome, to be honest. Yeah, he was a good guy all round. He said they don't come in often, but you get the odd one. All 3 masseurs were men, and they were all nice guys, so I was well looked after. What a gross weirdo. Look, as the first story indicated, more intimate masseurs do exist, but don't go in expecting if it's not advertised, folks. I do home visits. I'm a male masseur, by the way. Had a particular client 3 times. Usually I have clients stripped down to their undies. The second session, he got undressed, but I didn't think much of it as he seemed okay. At the end of the third session, as I was massaging his neck while he's on his back, he just started cranking it. I was kind of shocked in the moment and didn't know what to do. He reached for my hand as if to get me to finish him off, and at that point I stood up and said I've got to go. Was fairly awkward waiting for him to get dressed so I could pack my table and get my money and leave. I've had a couple of incidents in my 5 years. Female therapists would have it much worse. Sucks that massage is associated with that sort of thing because I really like helping people overcome aches and mobility issues, but it's hard to advertise without getting calls from guys wanting their eggplant tugged. My girlfriend is an LAC, and this dude used to come in and get acupuncture and crank it during the session. It never had anything to do with her, and he never asked her help or anything. He just needed to be getting needled while he was doing it. He paid her a lot more than her usual sessions and apparently had trouble getting off otherwise. He is almost 40 years her senior, and I've heard their sessions before. He truly just needed acupuncture to get off. She was never super comfortable with it, but it was good money, and eventually we didn't need that money, so she put a stop to it. He was totally respectful of that too. He never made a move and was always communicating very openly and honestly about what he needed. Pretty nice guy, if not a bit strange. He needed acupuncture to get off. What a prick. I live in China, and despite this idea of happy endings places, they're getting harder and harder to find in Shanghai, thank God. Massages here are as normal as going bowling or going for a coffee. It's fantastic and I have at least 2 a month. Nothing more lovely than a 90-foot massage. I usually fall asleep.
What's a 90-foot massage in metric units?
They parade 45 Chinese ladies down your back.
Or occasionally 15 old women using walkers.
Nothing more lovely than a 27 1/3 of AmITheA massage. I usually fall asleep. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My parents own a spa that I used to work at. I have a crap ton of stories, but here's a goodie. At one point, we had 2 male massage therapists. Now, I worked in the call center, and before booking a massage, we'd always clarify if the client was comfortable seeing a male massage therapist, as we had a majority female clientele. But one day, this male client booked a massage for himself with our male therapist, Ed. He was a new client and actually requested a male, whatever. Guy goes in for his appointment, and the first half is normal. The guy is undressed on the table with a blanket covering his lower half. First half of the massage, he's on his stomach. Then Ed tells him to go ahead and flip over on his back to continue. This fricker flips over and hands Ed a wad of cash from who knows where saying, "That's for you," and starts to feed the goose. Ed promptly said, "Alright, your appointment is done, they'll take care of you at the front desk," and books it out of there. The guy pays and leaves with no problem. Here's the kicker. Ed never told my parents, a manager, nothing. We only found out through work gossip. But because we didn't know about this creep, the guy ended up calling and scheduling another appointment with Ed. We found out shortly after booking the scoop, and the guy was asked to not come back. The spa's a pretty upscale place in the triple-digit price range, so not sure if the guy just thought we were an expensive spa with a side hustle or a really cheap brothel. They'll take care of you at the front desk.
Well, this is a strange joint.
Walks over to the front desk with his junk out. I get a call from my friend one night. Her boss wants a massage, and she recommended me. Since he's my friend's boss, I don't really worry too much, and head over to this dude's place with my gear. When I first come in and have everything set up, the guy offers me a Vegas bomb. I pass, and the massage starts as normal. Everything is going normal. This guy was Indian, I think, and was saying how this is great. He would recommend me to all his friends and stuff. But about halfway through, I hear, "Do you do happy ending?" My hands just froze. No one had ever asked me that before. My friends make jokes and all, but I'd never had this conversation with the client seriously asking this. The conversation goes like this. "Do you do a happy ending?" No. "Why not?" "Because that's disgusting and unprofessional." "I'll pay extra." "We're done here." I stopped the massage, packed up my gear, told him to pay the full price and left. Once I was home, I called up my friend to tell her what a creep her boss was. She started laughing her butt off. Apparently he had asked her if I did happy endings, and she thought he was joking and joked back yes. Comparing to the other posts in this thing, at least he asked. I was previously a certified massage therapist and nothing creepy or raunchy. I've been physically attracted to clients before, but it's drilled into your head that this is absolutely not the setting to pursue this. There was maybe one odd thing that isn't at all odd, but was simply distracting to me. I always drape the client so the top of the sheet is up to their armpits. So guys, and girls obviously, have their chests covered. This one guy though kept folding the sheet down to just under his chest. I'd keep moving him and adjusting the sheet, but he would eventually fold it back down. The edge of the sheet perfectly underlined his moobs, and I just kept getting distracted by them. They were like two eyes staring at me. I have a rare medical condition where I breathe through my chest. I once had a massage therapist repeatedly try to suffocate me. I wonder if the chest had a particularly chiseled set of pecs and thought that they needed to be admired by the world. Although it's more likely a sensitivity thing, right? My wife and I were at a small resort in Costa Rica. When we go on vacations, she always gets massages, but I never do. This time we decided to get a couple's massage. We get in the room, and the two are waiting for us by each table. She had this Latin love god, and I got a cute girl in her early 30s. They tell us to take off our clothes and give us these little paper undies, and then leave the room. The room was nice, it had a little fountain with some foliage and some soothing sound from speakers. We each looked at the paper undies and laughed and decided to forego them. It just seemed too silly. They started the massage and it felt good. She'd stretch my arm and then start working it, first going over it lightly, then gradually getting harder. The time came to do my butt. She moved the towel down and started massaging my cheeks, then the inside of my cheeks, which I thought was odd, but I'm new to the massage world and maybe that's what a deep tissue massage was. At this time I'm starting to feel, not relaxed but insecure. I suddenly became aware of my wife next to me who sounds more than relaxed. Meanwhile, back at my butt, she was doing the inside of the cheeks well. I'd hoped this was the last spot she'd do there. The last thing I want is butt cheek sweat rubbed all over my body. Then she started to press down on my actual butthole. I felt pressure building up behind her thumb. I clench, and I clench like I've never clenched before. I spin around and say very politely, "Thank you for the massage." My wife, "Our spa time isn't up yet," and I told her we have to go now. I told my wife what happened and she laughed at me and said, "Only to you." And now this is her favorite story to tell. Wife, do you remember that time we went on vacation and that cute girl finger blasted you in your turd cutter? Why must you bring that up every Thanksgiving? Someone I know, they're female, said that while doing a Brazilian wax on a male, he arrived. She just wiped it up and remained professional. I don't know how. I mean, you can't control stuff like that, it's biology. So long as he was apologetic about it and not creepy, I don't see this being a big deal. I have a friend who is a licensed massage therapist and has been studying medicine and been around doctors for much of his life. One of his sessions with a regular female client, while she was face down and he was in front of her, by her head, working on her back, she reached up and grabbed his butt. He asked what she was doing and she said, "Sorry, I don't know, I couldn't help myself." He told her not to do that again and the rest of the session continued as normal. At the end of the session, he got her a glass of water and as he turned around to leave, she grabbed his butt again. She apologized and seemed genuinely upset and embarrassed and insisted that she just couldn't help herself. My friend ponders for a moment before doing a peripheral vision check on her. Her vision is way below what is normal. The massage therapist calls the client's husband and suggests that they go see a doctor, because there might be something wrong with her impulse control and vision, suggesting it might be some sort of frontal lobe problem. Sure enough, a few days later, she had an MRI and there was a tumor developing in her frontal lobe. Glioblastoma, I think. I forget the exact medical language he used. It was removed and she's doing fine now. Believe me or not, I had a massage with a girl once and she was new. Before I flipped over from my stomach, she whispers, "Anything else I can do or focus on before you turn over?" Based on the place being one of the most popular places nationwide, I figured she meant it in a strictly professional manner. I said no, I turned over and she massaged my legs, no problems. But when she does my arms, she rests my hands on her chest slightly, and I had to think about my grandma so hard to keep from getting in trouble. We finished the massage and I left. I rescheduled and got her again a few weeks later, and she had changed up her style to rest my arm on her rolling chair for that. So someone must have mentioned something. When I was in school, I'd place an ad for in-home services as a means for getting me more practice and also to make some extra cash on the side. I did this while working 40 hours a week and going to school 10 hours a day on my days off. It was a pretty exhausting few months. Because I went to people's homes, I had some pretty specific steps about how I screened clients, being very clear about what services I was giving. It's a relaxation massage booked by the hour. I bring my table and you're fully draped up during this. Most people that were looking for something more were pretty upfront and rarely pushy, but I ended up with some good clients that were just busy or traveled into town regularly and didn't have time to visit a spa. One Friday, I was home in the evening and laying down for a nap when my phone rang with someone looking to book an appointment. I gave them the spiel about what I offered and prices, and he asked if he could get a massage without the blanket. Some people ask this, so I always liked to bring up how cold someone tends to get during a massage. The draping is for privacy. If you get overheated, I can just drape your waist, etc. When they hear this, most people got the point or were understanding. He was mildly fussy about the sheet, so I offered draping his waist with a towel. He responded saying this was fine, but I could. The phone started breaking up. I checked to see if he was still there. He was. We just hit a bad reception patch, no big deal. I confirmed the time and place and set the appointment for around 8 p.m. When I arrived at the client's townhouse, I woke up and I heard loud music playing. All I'm thinking of is that I hope he can hear me as I knock on the door, which opened to blast my ears with smooth R&B and revealed an old white man wearing a sleeveless coral shirt with ruffles. It looked like something an older woman would pick up from Walmart to dress casually in. I think nothing of it. Who am I to judge what weird clothes this guy wants to wear? And walk in, also noticing he's not wearing pants. Okay, whatever, he's Donald ducking around his apartment getting ready for a massage. But he's clearly wearing some kind of undies, so I don't acknowledge it. As I set up my table, focusing on my work rather than his odd attire, I make polite conversation. As I'm ready to go, I say that I need to change the music so I can focus and he can relax, and that I'll wash my hands. While I do that, he can climb onto the table and get under the towel on his back. This is when I turn to change the CD in his player, and I can see out of the corner of my eyes, as he took off the top, that he's wearing underneath the frilliest pair of lacy panties. This is not the most normal of situations, but I think I have two options. 1. This guy is a weirdo pervert and wants to get a reaction out of me for wearing something shocking. 2. This guy is into wearing ladies' clothing and this is how he gets to be in private. No matter what the actual answer, my best course of action is to not acknowledge his attire and go about the session. I worked through, did my routine as normal while he was on his back and focused on my work. For the most part, it was pretty standard massage, though I did have to fight the compulsion to flip the tag of his panties back inside his underwear, lest I call attention to them. But when I did this, he kept splaying his legs out, which, when I wasn't thinking, gave me a glance at his berries hanging out from that lace. His legs were pushed back together and I kept my eyes on the floor after that. At the end of the session, I cleaned up quickly, thanked him, collected my money, and left. At the end of it, he paid me 3 times my rate, which was nice. It was still an awkward session, though. In conclusion, I made money giving a normal massage to a guy wearing women's lingerie. I still don't know if it was a kink or his lifestyle. What's your most embarrassing doctor's office story?
So, yesterday I went to the doctor for some intestinal bleeding. My doctor is fairly new to the office, and I've only met her once before this. I'm only 21, so I've never had a reason for a doctor to go knuckle deep in my rectum before, but the doctor insisted that it needed to be done for some tests. So I bend over the table and she lubes up and digs for treasure. I hadn't dropped one out in a day or so because it hurts when I do so I was a bit stopped up. Upon starting to pull out, I immediately realized what's about to happen and try everything in my power to stop it. Too late. Doctor pulls her finger out and plop, out lands a turd right on the floor. I was able to hold back the rest, but the damage was done. In conclusion, dropped a steaming hot log right on the floor of my doctor's office.
Mine's not so much embarrassing as it is awesome. I had the mumps during my first year of college, and along with that I got orchitis, the swelling of the testicles caused by the mumps, in my left nut, which swelled up to the size of a potato. It was really painful and heavy, so I had to carry it everywhere for a while. So I went to the doctor's. He checked my mumps, and then I told him there was another problem. I dropped trow, lay on the doctor bed thing, and he came over to examine. He laughed when he saw it, because it was frickin' huge, and he said, "What seems to be the problem?" jokingly. At that moment, I pointed to my regular-size bollock and said, "This one shrank." Cue the 5-minute laughter from the doc. When I turned 30, I suddenly became a hypochondriac. I thought that everything was cancer or worse. So I'm seeing my doctor, who is a racquetball buddy, for my annual physical, and I mentioned that I was having some pains in the left side of my chest. I asked him, "I know this is rare, but could it be breast cancer?" I'm male, by the way. He felt around seriously, and then, with an absolutely straight face, he asked me, "Does the pain hurt worse when you're on your time of the month?" That was pretty much the end of my year of hypochondria. I had to go to the specialist urologist due to a pain in my ding-dong. My wife, who's awesome, accompanied me for support. The doc was at a teaching hospital, so he asked her if a couple of med students could observe the exam. I say, okay, my dignity was already at a new low anyway, so why not?
I drop trow and the doc starts yanking and a-pulling on mini-me. He takes some notes and then directs the 2 med students to cop a feel right where he did. I happen to look over at my wife who's trying to stifle a smile while watching 3 dudes essentially whack me off. In conclusion, my insurance paid for the most awkward hand action in the history of time, while my wife watched.
Well, whatever floats your wife's boat, I guess. Nothing like a mass audience for an inspection of one's manhood. On to the next story. This actually occurred shortly after I was born, and we refer to it as the green pea incident. My brother, 2 years old, was moving to solid foods and absolutely loved peas. Mushed, boiled, fried, or in things, he loved them. One day, my mum noticed that my brother wasn't going to the washroom. No big deal, she thought, it's been a day. 2 days later, nothing's coming out. He kept eating and eating like the happy little fat toddler that he was, eating all amounts of peas. My parents scheduled a day off work and took him to the doctor together. The doctor, of course, says that he must be constipated. It happens to the best of us. At this point, it's been 4 days since the little brat has taken one. The doctor gives him a large dose of prescription-strength X-Lax and suggests that they should probably keep an eye on him for the next while. As he's talking to my parents about what they should do, my brother starts to relieve himself. Bright, neon green crap. He had eaten so many peas that the fiber had actually clogged him up, and now it was returning in force. The semi-liquidated crap started flying out faster and faster, like you see in those comedy movies. Eventually, it settled down to a light stream, but not before his crap mist had covered the entire wall next to the examination table. Neon green crap mist. All over the doctor's tools, his blood pressure stuff, and his posters. It ruined the cushions on the table, and stank to high heck. My parents never went back to that doctor again. In conclusion, neon green crap mist.
I think after such a performance, you'd be obligated to give that doctor your business for the rest of your life.
A friend of mine mistakenly called her gynecologist instead of her dentist to make an appointment, and started the call by admitting she was overdue for a cleaning. Ugh. When I was brought up from being under anesthesia after getting my wisdom teeth out and before my transportation back home arrived, I recovered enough to unplug my IV and various sensor doodads, and wandered into the waiting room asking for some oral action. The nurse promptly gathered me back into my room, and I recall complaining that someone might have said yes, and I deserve the right to know. I remember my girlfriend and doctor laughing at me in the recovery room. I thought I was being completely logical, and I still don't know what I was saying. This story makes me not want to know. My father was getting his prostate checked out by this pretty good-looking female urologist. She had to insert a catheter since my dad was having trouble peeing. Anyway, she removed the catheter once they're done, and my dad starts peeing all over the doctor's leg. She took it like a champ and told him, "If I don't get peed on at least once a day, my husband will suspect I'm ditching work to have an affair." I can't imagine her actually having an affair. "Quickly now, pee on my leg, he won't suspect a thing." When I was newly pregnant with my daughter, I was at my OB's office for a pelvic exam. After I stirrup up, my doc is knuckle-deep in me and says, "Oh, you'll be fine if you have a big baby. There's plenty of room in here." I'm sure she meant that I have a wide pelvic arch and would have no trouble with a normal, natural delivery, but what I heard was, "Wow, I see dozens of these every day, but you have a huge, gaping hoo-ha." Last time I went to the OB or gyn, the doctor, female, just shoved her fingers in me without any warning so she could check my ovaries. I'm used to having doctors that do my exams at least warn me a little before they just cram stuff up in there. But nope, not her. After that wonderful incident, she pulls off her gloves and goes, "Wow, you're extremely tight. If you ever have a child, I would never suggest you give birth that way." Didn't even understand that she'd alarmed me in my hoo-ha, so how the heck was it supposed to be relaxed in any way? I'm definitely finding a new OB-GYN this year. One day, I was visiting a new doctor and he asked me to remove my trousers. I obliged, knowing that he'd probably check me for a hernia and make sure I didn't have a third ball or something. I'd forgotten that the night before, I'd shaved off exactly 1/2 of my hair down there. As my brain started to panic and he begins fiddling around, the doctor looks up at me and says, "It's easy to start, but it's hard to finish, isn't it?" While cauterizing the hole during my vasectomy, my skin smoked more than it should have, set off the fire alarm, and I ended up with numerous people of numerous career choices in the room with my exposed nutsack.
You should have said your wang was the new pope.
Oh, I figured that was implied. Oh gosh, I wonder if you wanted to undo your vasectomy after that, whether you'd actually be able to. That sounds serious, yikes. When my wife was in the final stages of labor, it seemed to be taking forever. I slipped out of the birthing suite to get some fresh air and make a couple of phone calls. They made me turn off my cell inside. A nurse came running and said to me,
"Quick, come back, it's all happening."
And they rushed me into a room where I was confronted with a huge hairy hoo-ha, from which a beautifully bushy, dark-haired Mexican baby literally fired out of the birth canal like a rocket. I'm going, what the frick, when the doctor hands me scissors to cut the umbilical cord. Well, that was fun, I thought, as I discreetly slipped out of the room and into the next room where my wife was still hours away from producing. Doctors and balls, man. Back in college, I was showering one evening and noticed a lump on one of my testes, which wasn't there before. I immediately assumed the worst, as you probably should with a lump suddenly appearing on your body, and made an appearance with the school clinic the next day. I'd already said my goodbyes to the little guy, and I was ready to have him removed.
"Sorry, dude, if you're a life-threatening illness, you're destroying this body and you have to go. Good luck, long live and prosper, etc."
Now I'm older, and I wouldn't really give a frick if I went full mast during an exam. I'd be all like,
"Hey, yeah, still got it, hey? Hey?"
Being an unrepentant pervert in situations like that is one of the great parts of getting older, but that's not part of this story. Anyway, I didn't really want to get hard or generally go showing my wang to strangers, but I also didn't want to die. First doctor to examine me looked exactly like the doctor on Battlestar Galactica, old, grizzled, and handles way too many nuts to care about mine. "Why don't they turn up the gosh darn temperature?" he tells me as he grapples with a man purse as hard and shriveled as a walnut. I swear to God, he had me in one hand and was bracing himself against the exam table with his knee as he pulled. "I'm going to breathe on it if it doesn't loosen up soon," he told me. Mercifully, it released its iron grip on my balls just long enough to avoid the hot breath of an old man on my junk. Yep, that's a lump. Go get an ultrasound. Needless to say, okay, maybe not on the internet, no half-masts were popped during that day. So I went to get the ultrasound. I sat around in a waiting room full of expecting women, all looking at me like,
"Why are you here?"
Finally, the doctor, a 4-foot woman who was the spitting image of my best friend's mum, calls me into the exam room, where I am to disrobe, surrounded by framed posters of innocent babies, and my cancerous eggplant. If you've had or seen an ultrasound, you know that they put some KY jelly on the surface and apply a wand that is vibrating at a very high frequency. If you've had your friend's mum give you an ultrasound right on your member, you know that she also had to grapple with your slippery, walnut-hard, turn-down the AC sack, and kept slapping your manhood out of the way as it flopped around. Finally, I'm like,
"I'll just hold myself out of the way."
Unfortunately, this doctor didn't have any sack experience. Only on babies, she admitted, so she called in the pro, a 30-something ex-frat boy. "Hey, nice member, man," he said, entering the sacred space where parents catch a first glimpse of their soon-to-be progeny. "Now, let's have a look at that sack. Okay, in a situation like this, you want to get your hands warmed up and cup them. You see? Yeah, that's how it's done. Okay, now you want to gently grasp the nut and just kind of work the wand over it like, oh hey dude, look, it's your right nut." He turns the monitor so I can see it.
"That is a perfectly healthy testes. It looks flawless. Okay, now you try."
Anyhow, they go back and forth, squeezing 2 full tubes of KY jelly onto my jewels. It kept making a farty noise when they squeezed it because they were just ham-fisting it, like some subhuman people do with tubes of toothpaste. It took them about 30 minutes of nut wondering to conclude the training session. Finally, they get around to the nut with the actual problem.
"Oh yeah, that's it right there. Look at that. Oh yeah, that's definitely a cyst for sure."
I'm all thinking, a cyst? Oh my gosh, I didn't read about that. You will not find anything about cysts when searching what is this lump on my sack, and I thought I was going to die. The doctor is like,
"You have a cyst, you can go."
And I was like,
Do I need to do something about this?"
His reply,
"Not unless you want some butthole mucking around with your scrotum for no reason."
It was a benign cyst that I still have. Nobody that isn't feeling my testes would know that it was there. Nothing to worry about.
In conclusion, not unless you want some butthole mucking around with your testes for no reason.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was in the waiting room of the hospital for a broken toe, I saw a somewhat elderly man, think 50s or 60s, come up to the nurse's desk and cough quietly. She waved him off as a sign to tell him to wait a minute, and he started to pace nervously. He was able to catch a male nurse walking by and try to discreetly tell him he needed immediate medical attention. I was wondering why the guy was so antsy, and that's when I noticed it. The guy had a mixture of brown and red fluid leaking down the back of his thigh from his shorts. The male nurse asked him to speak up, and even though he was quiet, I heard him mutter, "I got a toy so far up my butt that I can't reach it, and I don't want the entire gosh darn hospital to know about it." The male nurse seemed to hesitate a bit and motioned him to wait in an isolated room. In conclusion, older gentleman has a toy shoved too far up his butt and started leaking onto the floor. And that, kids, is why you always use flared bases.
Parents need to teach their kids these things.
I had a pay-the-bills type job as an administrator at a private hospital. We had an urgent referral come in for a testicular ultrasound, and the guy whose testes needed to be checked was quite a famous actor and was performing in a play in town, so the schedule for booking him in was really tough going. So I was skipping through the next 2 to 3 days of appointment calendars and looking for a free 10-minute slot or a before-lunch slot that was filled but likely to run short, so there'd be time to speed him in and out. He was on the phone while I was trying to book him in, and I got so self-conscious at the long silence, after explaining the normal waiting times and what I was doing, that I said, all cheery-like, "Don't worry, we'll squeeze your balls in here somewhere." I made sure not to be near the reception desk when he came in. "Okay, I for one would have appreciated your levity and attempt to lighten the mood, Mr. Hospital Administrator. I think this particular actor had no appreciation of comedic timing." So I used to always get pelinodal cysts when I was in high school. From between 13 to 18, I had it 5 times, which according to my doctor is a lot. These things used to hurt bad. I'd get them right above my tailbone and it would feel like the tailbone was broken. If I didn't get it dealt with right away, I wouldn't be able to walk from the pain. The last time I ever got one, it was horrible. It was Halloween and I was at my friend's house when I noticed it starting to hurt. I knew right away what it was. The next morning I had my mum take me to the doctor's office, but because it was a Saturday, my family doctor's office was closed, so we ended up going to a walk-in clinic. The doctor took a quick look at it and said it wasn't the problem and set me up for an x-ray. By the time the x-ray was over, it was hurting beyond anything I could imagine. It felt exactly like one of the cysts, but I trusted the doctor's word. Later that evening, the pain was so severe that I had to go to emergency. At the hospital, the doctor there took another quick look at it and told me it was nothing. He prescribed me some pain medication and sent me on my way. That night was horrible. I was terrified. I thought there was something severely wrong with me. I thought I'd cracked my tailbone after I fell over a balloon at my friend's house or something. On Monday, after a weekend of intense pain, I could finally go to see my family doctor. I remember the waiting room being filled with people. It hurt too much to sit, so I stood in the corner with my back bent weird because it hurt too much to stand up straight. All of a sudden, I felt instant relief, followed by a smell that was quite honestly the worst smell I'd ever smelled in my entire life, even to this day. It smelled like death. The people around me could smell it too. Everyone started coughing, but trying their best not to offend. I could feel my pants were completely wet with the pus from my cyst. When my name was called, I was so embarrassed. Everyone knew the smell was coming from me, and now they could see my drenched clothing. I mean, it was like I'd just dropped the top of my pants and the bottom of my shirt in water. That's how wet they were. The faces of the people were that of utter shock. They must have thought that I'd peed myself. Later in the office, the doctor took one step inside the room and said, "Ah, another cyst?" He knew just from the smell what it was. He took a look and said it was the biggest one he'd ever seen. He signed me up for surgery. Before, I'd just gotten little surgeries just for him to pop the cyst, not a surgeon removing the skin around the area so it would never return. And I've never had one since. On New Year's Eve 2001, I woke up with an unbearable pain in the left side of my abdomen. I couldn't move for over an hour. I was at home from my sophomore year of college, but none of my family was home. After about 3 hours of crying and doubled over in pain, I crawled across the house and called my mum at work. She took me to the ER where they did some various pressure tests and listening and decided it wasn't my appendix, so they did some x-rays. The only other person in the ER was an old lady that had a cut on her head, and she was trying to comfort me while my face was red and I was holding back tears. The doctor came in and looked at the lady and looked at me and whispered, "I don't know how to tell you this, but your colon is full of crap," the actual term he used. I screamed, "That's it? Get it out of me!" And he told me he could give me an enema, a suppository, or a salty drink. I took the drink and crapped for 8 hours straight. I was good enough to go to a party that night, but I still had the runs and didn't get drunk. I felt so much better. In conclusion, thought my appendix was rupturing, and the ER told me I was full of crap. After a rough night of praying to the porcelain goddess, also known as spewing my guts out, I discovered that most of the blood vessels in one eye had burst. The result was red where normally the eye is white, so I looked creepy as heck. The nephew told me I looked like Voldemort. Wife insisted I go to the doctor to get it checked out. So I did. I got a random lady doctor. She took one look at it and asked, "So, are you into any rough stuff in the bedroom?" To which I replied, no, not really." Her response, "Well, you should be careful with that choking stuff. It can be dangerous." I laughed nervously and the nurse kept staring at the floor and I proceeded to explain that I'd been vomiting all night. Even as I left, she said, "Well, just be more careful next time." Oh yes, and the best part, this was in Provo, Utah, 99% Mormon and apparently home of rough, strangling nights of passion. Was getting a physical a few years ago so I could play high school football. Usually the doctor feels around your abdomen and that's that. This time the doctor made me strip and made me cough. I hadn't had fun with myself in a few days, and that with the combination of a stranger's hands on my beans gave me a semi, which I tried to cover, which led to me to accidentally toot on him as I turned around. The doctor looked at me and said, "You can play football," and he just left. I was 10. I went to the ER with a ruptured appendix. They had trouble diagnosing my problem and sent me in for an enema. The doctor was doing his thing. I said, "You must be the least popular doctor in the hospital." "Well, yeah, I don't get many thank you cards, that's for sure." I recently had a sore throat, and when trying to get a good look at it in the mirror, I noticed these large pink spots all over the back of my tongue. I spent a week fretting over it, wondering what they were and why they weren't going away, until my mum got worried enough about them that she went with me to the doctor. Upon examining my throat and tongue, he pronounced that what I was seeing was my taste buds. I've never seen my doctor, who's an incredibly stoic man, smile so wide before. My family is never going to let me live it down. Went to the doctor when I was about 8 months pregnant. At that point in my pregnancy, I was very gassy, and if I tried to hold it in, it would get painful after a while. While I was sitting in the doctor's office, I felt like I had to pass wind. I held it in for a while, thinking that if I did do that, the doctor would be in at any moment. 15 minutes passed and nothing, so I decided to let it go. The tiniest little toot ever, but it stunk like something crawled up my butt and died. 30 seconds later, the doctor walked in and asked me what that smell was. That sounds like what happens to me in any given situation where I think I'm alone, and you have mine and presumably many listeners' sympathies. Had nasal polyps removed. When there are a crap ton of them, after the procedure there are several follow-ups to get minor stragglers, but mostly also to remove giant blood clots that have formed. My otolaryngologist is busy digging and scraping and scooping, and some monster fricking aliens are being dragged out. I can see my nostrils expanding like I'm passing a chicken egg-sized baby out of them, and they schloop shut again. Anyway, he's grinding and yanking at this one and it won't come loose. He rotates it a bit, gently places it in a tray and says nothing but leaves the room with a half smile. 3 minutes later, he comes back and tells us he had a silent freakout and had to wash up, because a giant bloody string of snot carried elasticity from the pull and slapped up against the length of his cheek like a cheap 25-cent toy from the bins at the front of a Kmart. Getting my very first pelvic exam. First, the doctor was nervous, so she dropped the speculum, getting it out of the package. Hands shaking and everything. Okay. I'm on the table, speculum inside of me, and doctor and the nurse are hanging around my lady bits. I'm trying to pretend that I'm not here when the doctor goes, are you on your time of the month? No. Why? Oh! In her nervousness, she'd been way too rough and made me bleed. Thanks, doc. Massive hemorrhoids. Went to the doctor and he had to stuff my butt back inside my butt. Had to lay on my side for 3 days. I was having a lump on my nuts checked. I described said lump to the doctor and he went about trying to locate it himself. I was lying down at this stage, staring at the ceiling. After about a minute of him fumbling, he admitted defeat and asked me to find it. So I sat up and started to jumble them around in my hands. I was hunched over and he wasn't more than a foot away, staring intently at my jewels when suddenly a gust of wind blew the door wide open. Just then a nurse walked past the door. That was awkward eye contact. What are some of the creepiest mental conditions you've ever encountered? A lot of people know about phantom limb syndrome, in which someone continues to feel as if their limb is still there after it's been amputated, often in great pain. Another interesting one that not many people know about, and is almost kind of an opposite, is body integrity identity disorder, which is when a person has extremely strong feelings that one or more of their limbs doesn't belong to them, despite being functional, and often they really want to amputate. From their descriptions, it seems that it's actually very psychologically painful. Sometimes to the point where they will self-amputate because no doctor is willing to amputate a healthy limb. I once read a short, fictional story where the narrator is talking about the terrifying, deformed growths on his hands and is frustrated that everyone is downplaying his worries and pretending he's normal. Eventually, by the end, he decides to deal with it himself, and he uses power tools to remove all 10 of the disgusting growths. This sounds slightly like what I experienced a lot going through puberty. I felt as though my member wasn't actually mine. I had thoughts constantly about wanting to try and get rid of it with a pair of gardening shears, but I could never actually build up the willpower to do it. I never felt actual physical pain from it, but I remember lying in bed at night in emotional and mental pain, trying to figure out why I was so uncomfortable with myself. Eventually, by the end of my sophomore year of high school, I was able to accept that even though it may seem like it isn't an actual part of me, in reality, my member was mine, no one else's, and that's how it had to be. This was only accomplished by losing my virginity. I've never heard of anything more psychologically incredible than a fugue state, when the mind can't deal with reality, so it just creates an entirely new world for itself to live in. Or you just need time to deal with Tuco. A friend of mine is suffering the Capgras delusion. We moved apart several years ago and hadn't been in touch very well. I know she had gone through some stressful times. I had a couple of phone calls with her where she was worried that her computer had been hacked, but she seemed reasonable. Then one day she called me and told me that her husband had been replaced with an imposter. She wanted me to fly to visit her so I could see him with my own eyes and confirm for her that it wasn't really him. Talking to her is simultaneously fascinating, unnerving, and heartbreaking. The worst part is, while she's clearly not correct in her beliefs, she is quite consistent in them, and they are utterly real in her mind. Imagine how freaking terrified you would be all the time if you were certain that the most important person in your life was a stranger with mysterious, nefarious motivations. Imagine going to bed every night next to someone you thought was out to get you. Imagine spending all day desperately trying to find your husband because he must be out there somewhere, right? Oh my gosh, imagine being the husband. I did talk to him for a while. He was unbelievably stressed out. He was doing everything he could for her. Meanwhile, she treated him like a stranger. That is a rough deal. In some ways, I can't think whether this or a terminal illness is worse for someone's family when it happens. I was in a psych ward for depression, and my roommate was terrifying. She was schizophrenic, depressed, and also probably just kind of weird. She punched herself in the face constantly while whispering to the voices in her head. She also used to sit in the multi-purpose TV room, TV, games, fridge, etc., on the floor and flicked the bean. Like, a lot. But she never stopped whispering to herself while she did it. I woke up to tinkle one night and she was just in her bed, staring blankly at me. She was moved to a long-term facility on my third day there. Oh god, I had a similar experience with my roommate. He was this really big guy, very nice and well-mannered. He'd tell us and the doctors during group therapy about how his mother didn't care about him. He told sob stories like many people there did, and it was sad but not unusual. Then one day, one of the doctors mentioned something about a certain medication he was taking, and I recognized it as an antipsychotic. It turns out he was a paranoid schizophrenic, and it just terrified me when I put the pieces together. And then I overheard his mother sobbing as she left from a visit and his father trying to calm her down and reassure her that he doesn't know what he's saying, and it wasn't his fault. Reactive attachment disorder. I work at a group home for kids with this disorder, and it was creepy before I fully understood it. Children who've been severely mistreated or neglected early in life often have their ability to form healthy attachments to caregivers or anyone destroyed. Some of them would cling to me, call me mummy, beg to come home with me 30 seconds after I met them. Others would refuse to talk to anyone, hurt themselves and others, set fires and act out any chance they could.
Sometimes they would improve only enough to be sent to foster homes, only to have their behavior come back worse once they were placed in an unstructured family setting. It's extremely tragic. I had, or have, I guess, this disorder. I've grown out of the destructive episodes and bullying, but I still don't really have any relationships with people outside of my work or family. It's scary to look back on it now because I could have wound up in adult prison, but I used to lay awake at night and think about how I could manipulate the staff at my group home into killing each other. They were like Iago-level schemes. I figured out who was screwing who already didn't like each other, etc. I was even worse in foster homes. I bullied other kids for money and stuff, ran away constantly, stole everything I could get away with. I stabbed an adult in the leg when I was 10 because he called me a craphead, which admittedly was accurate. I also tried to do the deed with all of my foster moms and pretty much every other adult woman in my life. There are so few reliable long-term studies on RAD. Existing research suggests kids do grow out of it to the point where they no longer fit the diagnostic criteria as adults, but it still impacts their relationships. This is one of the reasons I think it's wrong to even suggest a child has antisocial personality disorder before age 18. Once you have that label, it sticks, and if a kid thinks they're born bad, they're more likely to act that out. I'm really sorry for what happened to you. It's not your fault, it's a normal reaction to the abnormal situation you're put in. I spent some time in the group homes and foster care myself, and it's what caused me to study psychology and social work. You're already ahead of the game by being so self-aware, so please don't give up continuing to heal. Oh, I have one. Now, nobody's been diagnosed with this in 40-odd years or so, but it's still taught in most undergrad courses because it's a really good example of culture-specific disorder. It's called Wendigo psychosis, or Wendigo, Wetico, or Wintico, and here's how it goes down. You're a young male in an Algonquin tribe. It's been a long, cold winter and your whole tribe is starving. You and your hunting partner have been out hunting for moose or deer or even a bear if you have to, but you've totally struck out. You're starving, he's starving, and you've seen the way he's starting to look at you over the fire at night. So you do what you have to do before he does. You kill him and eat him. You know what happens when you eat another man, but you're starving and it's cannibalize or die. So you eat him, and the Wendigo comes and possesses you, because the Wendigo possesses everyone who eats someone else. And now that the Wendigo has possessed you, you're hungrier than you were. Hungrier than you've ever been before. But the only thing you're hungry for is more people. So you go back to your tribe and one of two things happens. One, you tell someone and they attempt to cure you by having you eat melted bear fat until you vomit the heart of ice you now have because you're a Wendigo demon. 35% of reported cases were cured by this method. Or two, you don't tell anyone. You go back to your tribe and attempt to kill and eat a family member. You'll eventually be stopped and killed during your murderous and cannibalistic rampage, and your remaining families will burn your body and scatter the ashes to prevent the Wendigo from possessing them too. The other 65% of reported cases. In conclusion, Wendigo psychosis is when you think an Indian demon possesses you, and then you try to eat your family. Fatal familial insomnia is pretty freaking scary. Suddenly you just start not being able to fall asleep, and you're gone within 7 to 36 months. You gradually lose the ability, along with a number of other symptoms over time, until eventually, at the end of the last stage, you'll not have slept in a long time. You'll be hallucinating and suffering from dementia, and eventually, you'll die. Only 40 families, about 100 people, have the disorder. Also, if you have it, there's a good chance you'll have kids by its onset, making the disorder pass down even further. Scary stuff. Diseases caused by prions are really scary. Every one of them, and all fatal. This is one of the most fascinating things I've heard about, and a single gene is responsible. Split brain syndrome. Sometimes as a means of treating severe seizures or epilepsy, surgeons will sever the corpus callosum, the connecting tissue between the two lobes of the brain. The good news is that future full-blown seizures are limited to one half of the brain, leaving the patient aware and able to take precautionary measures. The bad news is that thanks to the lateralization of function, there are essentially two minds in the skull that can each only react to certain forms of stimuli. Patients usually develop workarounds, though. The weirdest part is the occasional outcome of alien hand syndrome, in which one of the brains takes control of one hand and uses it independently. When questions are presented to the controlling hemisphere, the hand can write out its answers, which are sometimes in disagreement with the main brain and the patient's spoken answers. It's been a while since I've studied abnormal psych, so the details might be a little fuzzy. This sounds like something we would ridicule in the future, like we do with some of the medical practices of the Middle Ages. Nurse here. First patient who thought she was the devil scared the crap out of me. You eventually get so used to people who think they're the devil and become numb to all the weird crap they do.
This seems like the opposite of the scenario of multiple people with messiah complexes being kept together. What a perverse and, of course, tragic situation. I live with a longtime friend who I'm convinced is developing or has developed disorganized schizophrenia over the past 3 years. It's not as crazy or mind-blowing as some of the other ones in this group of stories, but it is truly messing up his life and making it exceptionally hard for me to tolerate him on a daily basis. More bizarre than anything. In the past couple of months, especially, he's exhibited extremely antisocial and disorganized behavior. Everything from inappropriate emotional reactions to regular life events, to an inability to form complete sentences or thoughts in a conversation, to plain old just messing around with people by not making any sense, sometimes on purpose, and sometimes unknowingly. He used to be an extremely personable guy who could just approach anyone and make friends. Now he literally can't hold a conversation, but he still wants to be really approachable and personable, but doesn't realize that he actually creeps people out so much that they will passionately avoid talking to him again. The most frustrating thing that he does is basically attaches to me whenever I'm at home. He'll stand at my bedroom door and watch me do my homework, fold my laundry, clean my room, work on my computer, build Legos, etc. He will always be in the same room as I am unless I've shut my bedroom door. He mimics my actions, wakes up whenever I do, goes to sleep whenever I do, always wants to cook or clean wherever I am. I essentially have to find things that he can't or doesn't know how to do to get some freedom. It's mostly me because I've known him for way longer than my roommates, but when I'm not home, he does all of this to them as well. I think this all stems from his inability to make basic decisions, like when to eat or where to study, or when to leave in order to be on time for something. This extends to almost every aspect of his life. I've been seeing a counselor to consult with her about it, but it's basically impossible to know anything for sure, because she can't tell me any information about him or his visits. He started going as well. I don't know if he goes to them unless I ask him, and there's no telling when he'll forget about a session or just decide not to go to the doctor's evaluation. It's even more frustrating that his counselor keeps telling me that I shouldn't keep reminding him of these things or keeping tabs on him, because eventually I will be like a mother taking care of an infant child. My words, not hers, and she is right, but it is upsetting. Weirdest part, he's studying behavioral neuroscience. In conclusion, I've been friends with my roommate for over a decade. In the past 3 years, he's developed disorganized schizophrenia right in front of my eyes, and there's nothing I can do about it. He's echoing, repeating your behaviors and actions as a way to cope. Some will do it in conversations as well, latching onto a phrase of importance and repeating it. The rain is really bad today.
Yeah, the rain is bad.
It's a sign of cognitive impairment. Your story is sad. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm a psych major, so not a professional, but in my opinion it is catatonic schizophrenia. Those suffering from this type of schizophrenia, although in the DSM-V they're getting rid of the different types of schizophrenia and there'll just be one classification, will sometimes be unable to speak or move. My professor worked in a clinic while in school and told us of one patient who would suddenly lock up into extremely awkward positions and not move for extended periods of time.
This used to happen to a friend of mine. He passed away 3 years ago, and it was absolutely freaking terrifying. The first time it happened, we had no idea what to do, so we just called an ambulance.
I'm sorry to hear that. I can't imagine how it would feel to witness something like that and have no way of explaining it before a diagnosis. Another scary part of mental illness is that more often than not, those who are suffering from the condition, whether it's schizophrenia or something else, will oftentimes not even notice it themselves. I spent a week in a mental ward. I had depression and I'd told a cop I wanted to take my own life in a fit of rage. The hospital I was at was divided. One side was Group A, folks who needed treatment but were considered safe. Group B was the folks that had to be watched more closely. About 2 days after I was checked in, another woman had come in too. She was also placed in Group A and was placed as my roommate. At first she seemed nice and normal-ish, but after a few hours her stories were getting mixed up. I mean, she came in, found out I had a kid, and then said she had a daughter as well, who lived with her mother-in-law, or something. After dinner, the story was that her daughter had been lost after being brutally murdered by her father, and that the woman didn't even care. I voiced my concerns to the nurses, but I was just told to go to bed in the same room with this lady. It took a while for me to fall asleep that night because my sleep schedule was all sorts of messed up. I think I passed out around midnight. We were put to bed at 8 p.m. I'm not sure how long I was asleep for before I was woken up by my roommate strangling me. Now, we were placed in the last room at the end of the hall, far from the nurse's desk. Plus, I was being strangled, so I couldn't even yell for help. I thought I was going to die, but I'd fallen asleep with a book. So I bashed the book on my roommate's head and booked it out of the room. The nurses probably thought I was the super crazy one yelling at them. I'm not sure they would have believed me if it wasn't for the fact that I had hand marks around my neck. My roommate was transferred to the other side of the ward, locked up with a limited time out of her room. I never bothered to ask what her deal was. I don't want to know. I had a new roommate by the end of the day, a really nice older lady who was a lesbian. I told her about crazy roommate number 1, and we would just shoot the crap for hours at night until I was ready to pass out. What reason is there to have roommates in a psych ward? It sounds like you're asking for trouble. Yeah, I thought so too, but everyone on the safe side had a roommate. Only had X amounts of rooms. If the second roommate never came, I would have been alone. Only us 2 chicks on that side the whole time I was there. It must be because of the money, because my friend had to go to an institution when he was a teenager and was thinking of taking his own life, and they didn't even let him talk to his roommate. It sounded like prison and it made him more depressed. He also had a 9-year-old roommate who'd attacked his mom. They made the kids go around and say why they were there every day in the group therapy, so every day everyone was reminded about what that kid did. My friend's mom took him out after a week. The big difference with these things lie with whether or not it's a place where the patients are there voluntarily. When I was checking myself into the psych ward last year, depression, wanting to hurt myself, my doctors told me not to go to the hospital that has non-voluntaries. That's where you're going to see the horrifying roommate stuff. Unfortunately, I would say a good number of people don't have a choice though. The scariest thing I know of is locked-in syndrome, where you're completely awake but unable to move. People assume you're a comatose vegetable when you're really just paralyzed, for decades.
Not the same thing, but similar. My mom was having open-heart surgery when the anesthesia wore off, though she was still paralyzed, so she could feel everything. Apparently it didn't hurt too much, but was scary as frick. Happened 2 or 3 times, I think. There's an amazing film about this condition. It's called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. A true story about Jean-Dominique Bauby, who was the editor-in-chief of Elle magazine until he suffered a stroke that led to locked-in syndrome. The film was adapted from a book that he wrote using only one eyelid to communicate. That's a grim fate to be sure, although that's the norm in this story grouping. Your psych evaluations are just as important as your medical checkups, folks. I'm a paranoid schizophrenic. I don't believe there's anything scarier on the planet than an episode. Nothing is more terrifying than being betrayed by your own mind. The things you hear and see, it's awful. I'm a psychology major, but this story doesn't have to do with my schooling. To put myself through school, I worked as a receptionist at a swimming pool, and Thursday is the day when individuals with disabilities and mental disorders come to the pool with their workers. I was on the other side of the counter helping the individuals into the changing rooms, and one of the clients grabbed my hair and started screaming at me that it was too beautiful and she needed to take it. One of the single most upsetting moments of my life, because after her worker managed to get her to relinquish my hair, she just continued to scream wordlessly until I was no longer in her sight. Wife is a psychologist. She says shared delusional disorder. Woman and her mother had paranoid delusions about mom's ex-husband and were convinced he was stalking them and breaking into their house. The ex had gotten the woman's son, aged 6, a modeling contract, and they thought that every picture of a kid in a magazine was him. The images that didn't look like him, they claimed were photoshopped. This was so weird and creepy since 2 people shared the same delusions. Psychologist here, work specifically with kids with degenerative or developmental disorders, and in my day I have seen some crap. There is nothing creepier than something called happy puppet syndrome, aka angel man syndrome. It's a disease most commonly found in children where they always have a happy effect, even when they're upset. And to top it all off, their motor skills are affected in such a way that their limbs move as if they're on marionette strings. There's a condition where people believe that their life is like the Truman Show, and that nothing in their life is real. I think that's creepy because there's no way to convince them that they're not part of a TV show. Yeah, this happened with my ex-boyfriend. Not exactly that it was a TV show, but still thought everyone in the entire world was watching him. Really scary stuff.
Happened to me on a bad substance trip. Didn't help that I blacked out and came to in the backseat of my car at sunset at the beach, not another soul in sight. For about 20 minutes, I thought I broke the illusion and now I was going to live forever in an empty simulation. Friends weren't answering my calls or anything. Way messed up. When I was younger, I was a pretty unstable kid, which led to multiple stays in a youth psych ward. One of the times I was in, we got a boy who looked like a 14-year-old fatter, paler, creepier Jack White. So we find out that he threatened to kill and eat his school principal, which even to a bunch of mentally ill teens was psycho as frick. I felt bad for him because obviously he was messed up in the head, way more than us at least. But he would say all of these awkward things trying to be funny that ended up sounding like serial killer quotes like, "Do you ever wonder what it feels like to be dead or eat someone?" Which especially to the girls was freaky as F. So after my roommate gets out, I hear that this Hannibal Lecter wannabe is moving into my room. It's weird, but I just brush it off. I was 250 pounds and 5'10", and he was just him. And every once in a while when he made a messed up joke, they would just pull him aside and tell him to chill out. But one day I don't see him, and one of the doctors calls me in. They tell me he's in his own room in solitary now, and they pull out his notebooks and it's filled with drawings of me while I sleep. Fantasy drawings of him doing the deed with me, killing me, eating me, and pages of ramblings on how he would F me or how I would taste. It's literally the entire notebook, front to back, filled with these drawings and writings. I'm so petrified that I don't talk or leave my room for days. He apparently got sent to a long-term center far away, but I ended up staying even longer since they thought I would try to self-delete over that. But that's the story. Never saw or heard from him again. Still think about it all the time. It's hard to sleep around other people anymore. I was once in a party and joined this group of people, of which I knew just one person. He introduced me to the others one by one, and when I arrived at the last one, Noah, I shook his hand and petted his shoulder. He grabbed my arm and flipped it around and almost snapped it. Needless to say, it was the most awkward situation in my life, and even thinking about it makes me grind my teeth. I learned that Noah had been in Afghanistan and he freaked out when something or someone touched him from his back. It might have been post-traumatic stress disorder, or he was just hypervigilant. Don't forget that hypervigilance is necessary to keep one alive in conflict. The saddest thing is the high number of servicemen who are returning from war with these sort of mental problems. At least now they recognize PTSD as a real problem, so better debriefing can occur when servicemen return, or early intervention support can be provided, unlike the Vietnam vets who had to suffer in silence for decades. But unfortunately, the soldiers still aren't receiving the level of help that they need to deal with these sorts of issues. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description. Gentlemen, what are some telltale signs that a woman is creepy? If she doesn't ask me many questions or doesn't seem interested in my life but still manages to be clingy. AKA she just wants a boy, doesn't care who. Or just wants self-validation and doesn't care where from. When she puts a phone in your trunk on top of your spare tire to track you via GPS. I don't use my trunk. She knew that. She hooked it up to the 12-volt charger in my trunk and put a tracking app on the additional line she bought. I only discovered it when I had a blowout and had to use it. When I questioned her about it, she said she had trust issues. But good news! Every time I told her I was somewhere, I was at that place. We broke up after that. The story had a happy ending for me. It was a toxic relationship, but my next relationship was with the woman who would become my wife. We'll be celebrating our 8th wedding anniversary in a couple of months. I sometimes wish I'd been able to help my ex. She had quite a few good qualities, but the suspicion, insecurity, and attempts to control me were too much for me to deal with at the time. It sucks when you see what someone could become, but you know they probably never will. Girlfriend was practicing her signature and asked if she could see mine. Innocent enough, right? I rattle off a few beautiful Johnny Hancocks on a napkin and beyond admiring my own handiwork, didn't think of it further. Fast forward a week and she says, "Check out my new tattoo." And sure enough, it's my signature. First name only, on her right, or wrong, hip. Yikes. Fast forward to her solo European trip, turns out she cheated on me with a guy with the same first name. I bet he was scared. This girl I met on Tinder had me take her out to a restaurant and then switched tables with her friend. They'd been on blind dates and decided to switch. Her friend was not as attractive and I was very uncomfortable. After ordering my food, I went to the bathroom for 10 minutes to contemplate my exit strategy. When I got back, they'd both left. The other guy asked if he could sit with me, so we had dinner and he ate his dates enchiladas. It was actually kind of fun after they left. This turned out way nicer than expected. And? You and that guy fell in love over those enchiladas and have been married for 20 years now? No, we both ate and I fronted the tab because it was $26 and I was in a good mood. I saw him on campus about a year later and kind of smiled in memory. Commiseration meals. There is something so very wholesome about the result of this, even if it was just an hour's companionship instead of a lifelong friendship. My ex would freak out and throw things and scream at me. And that's not the disturbing thing. She would freaking forget about it and hit reset and act like it didn't happen the next day. Over and over. I started filming her episodes to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy.
That's called gaslighting. It's a form of emotional abuse, and I most often see people who are very, very insecure deep down use it.
My dad did this to me and my siblings as we were growing up. He would have these big blow-ups at us and shout at us to leave the house, tell us we're worthless, what have you. The next day he'd be offering to make us lunch before we left for our work shift. If we, being vulnerable teenagers with bruised feelings, would turn down the offer, he'd get mad again. Not super aggressive necessarily. I'd leave for work early before letting it get that far, but he'd complain to our mum that we are ungrateful and mean to him because we refused his gracious offer. Happy news, my dad actually started to get real help about 3 months ago. This behavior was ongoing for the last 15 years, but for the last 2 months, I've been getting updates saying he's doing better.
When after 2 days she tells you that she loves you, and also proceeds to mention that she loves your green eyes so much that if we ever broke up, she would steal them while you sleep and keep them in a jar in her room. When she constantly tells you how everybody in her life is out to get her, and nothing is her fault. I've been friends with her for about 15 years, and at times it feels like being a victim is her entire identity. At work, all of her bosses hate her for no reason, or because she's a woman, even though it seems to follow her from job to job, and she has many female bosses with whom this problem still exists. Her group of friends are completely different every 1.5 years or so, because she inevitably has a falling out and it's always their fault. In relationships, she behaves as if her boyfriend du jour is the only redeeming light in a world of evil, rotten people, until they break up, at which point he's always portrayed as a bullying monster and a shining example of what pigs all men are, in very public tirades on every social media page she has. Constant subtweets 24/7, but more so after a breakup. Now, I don't doubt that she's been hurt in relationships before. She, nor anybody else, doesn't deserve that. But I do have a hard time believing that every single man she's ever dated is a psychopath, every single boss she's ever had has been mistaken and out to get her, and every single best friend is actually a two-faced B-word. At some point, the common factor in all these situations is her. I don't mean to minimize the bad relationships she might have had. They are real issues, and people claiming abuse should be believed and should be taken seriously. After all these years and all these instances of problems, I do have a hard time believing her specifically, though. If the whole world smells like crap, check your shoes. If you meet a butthole in the morning, you met a butthole. If you meet buttholes all day long every day, you're the butthole. Anyone who just posts stuff about their exes on social media is someone to stay away from. It just screams, I'm an attention seeker and I'm unable to be mature about breakups. Bonus points if none of the problems in the relationship were apparently their fault.
She'll joke about having kids before you're even in a serious relationship. I went on a couple of dates with this one girl who had mentioned how much she wanted kids. Nothing unusual, pretty common actually. I'm looking forward to being a dad one day. Then she started sending me those weird things where you put two people's pictures together and see what their kids would look like. One time would be quirky, but she sent me a different one every morning for a week. Broke it off when I realized I hadn't even given her a picture of myself.
Oh, that last sentence was like a horror movie, oh my god.
Met this girl in church group in middle school. We got to know each other because of the group, but didn't really become friends or anything. Stopped going when I went to high school and never really talked to her for 3 years. Then she commented on a Facebook status I had and we got to chatting and I agreed to hang out the next weekend. I asked if we should invite other people in our church group since I hadn't seen any of them in a while and she said no. I thought this was because she liked me and wanted to hang out with me, so I was flattered. I kept talking to her throughout the day. The next morning I woke up at around 10 a.m. to about 7 or 8 missed calls, 2 voice messages and countless text messages from her. I was pretty creeped out by then. The nail in the coffin was one of the messages I got was from an old friend from the church group asking me if I talked to that girl. I was confused how my friend knew I'd talked to this girl before. Turns out the girl had started messaging my friends asking when I wake up in the morning and why I hadn't messaged her back.
That went from, oh yeah, going on a date to nope, overnight.
I had this. I was excited to go on a first date with a cute girl. Night before the date, everything is good. Come morning, I get a text from her saying she's a little nervous because she just got out of a fairly serious relationship. I replied saying, yeah, that's fair, how recent was it? I'm wondering if this is like last week, a few months ago, just trying to understand her position. She flips a switch and starts swearing at me and acting like I was accusing her of something. Very odd. She got very defensive. I told her not to worry about the date, maybe not the best timing. She says some snide, yeah, fine. And that really was that. Very strange. Plot twist. The relationship was to be ended the next day after you proved stable enough a stepping stone. Hopefully these were all teenage problems rather than personality problems. Let's hope that the girl in the first story grew out of it. I once responded to a flatmate ad, but the criteria was single male 30-ish-year-old. Turns out she wasn't looking for a flatmate, she was looking for a husband. I was always clear that she would just be a flatmate to me. The weird things included getting upset when I didn't make her aware of when I was coming home or just coming home late. She slept in a pile of laundry, but the rest of the house was immaculate. I brought a girl home once, and she moved from the lounge to her bedroom beside mine so she could hear what was going on. Things got super weird after a lot of daytime texting with nonsense questions and flat meetings. Then outright banning my friends. Then an extreme amount of verbal abuse, and when I moved out, she'd just come up to me and yell stuff like, "You're such a fricking loser." Basically, I'd started seeing another girl and she went over the edge. I always refrained from reacting and just got the frick out. For those of you wondering, no, I never slept with her and the boundaries were always super clear from the start. Specifying age and gender and relationship status is pretty common for a share house, and I've spent 10 years traveling and working in different countries and see that requirement all the time. This happened in Melbourne, Australia, and I'd just moved to there, and I was trying to get out of a backpacker hostel quickly. There weren't many red flags on the ad, or our first meeting, but a lot was hidden from me before I moved in. The laundry pile was always on her bed. I have no idea if it was clean or not, but it was always there every day. Some of you are saying that's not weird, but I haven't seen that before or after. She wasn't ugly, but she wasn't anywhere near hot enough for me to take the risk. When I say she moved from the lounge to the bedroom, I mean she was watching TV in the lounge, we came in and said hello, went to my bedroom moments later, and we could hear her in there reading a book. We never had any conflict up until I gave her notice about moving out and she asked if it was her. It was, but I made up some crap about being new to the area and wanting to be somewhere more social, closer to the nightlife, etc. The girl I'd started seeing was mega hot, way out of my league, and the awkwardness of bringing her to my flat surely ended that relationship prematurely. I could also tell she was in the next room because people who are alive and nearby make normal human noises. Also, sadly, I got instantly friend-zoned by the hot girl, so we were just hanging out. It was easy to hear noise from the next room, not sure why that confused people. I was always super nervous around the hot girl, I don't know why. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Here are some of my red flags. She dyes her hair every color of the rainbow just to see how you'll react. Tells your family to back off because you're hers. Cheats with her male roommate while you run out to the car to grab a red box. Gives you herpes. F you, Rachel. Go eat a bag of members. An inability to apologize for anything ever. Punishing you with the silent treatment for doing something you had no idea would be offensive to them. Having expectations of you, and then they don't try to meet them themselves. I would never stand that in a relationship, but it happened to me with work colleagues. They never understood why I don't mind that they're ghosting me instead of annoying me or freaking out at me. Some nice peace and quiet for a change. In high school, there was a girl who liked me. She ended up carving my name into her foot. Soulmate.
She probably wanted a friend in you.
No, I think she wanted the friend in her. Asking for your passwords, your phone, email, Facebook, etc. as a sign of trust. Nope, I have nothing to hide. However, when you think you need to have that information, it shows you already don't trust me. And anyone who asks and then says they won't use it is lying. They may not use it that day or even soon, but they will use it at some point, because the same suspicion that led to them asking for it will lead them to use it. Oh, and I'm not talking about something like your Netflix or Amazon Prime password, which can just be convenient. Heck, I have some of my friends' Netflix passwords. We're talking about phone, email, and social media passwords specifically. Secondly, if you want to offer it, more power to you. But someone shouldn't ask for that is my thought, especially not as a way to prove that you aren't cheating. And 3, like most things, marriage changes stuff. I still think it's a bit much to have all of someone's passwords and have access to everything they ever do or people say to them, but I understand it a bit more in that situation. I had a girlfriend who yelled at me for spending $9,000 on my mountain bike instead of her. I race professionally and I took her out to dinner at least 3 times a week and got her gifts all the time. Plus, we got to travel the world thanks to sponsors. But the one purchase for myself was too selfish. The bike was an Aurum HSP2 with box components, in case you're wondering. This is literally my roommate's girlfriend. He takes her out to dinner 3 times a week, travels 50 miles every week back and forth to visit her at school, buys her jewelry and nice things, etc. Yet the one time he couldn't make it to her school for a visit, she called him to scold him for his selfishness and then broke up with him via text. The saddest part is that he drove all the way to her school that night to talk to her about it, and she fell asleep before he arrived, so he had to sleep in a parking lot in his car overnight. Until she woke up. Somehow they're still together. Makes me mad because he deserves so much better. You should remind these people of the sunk cost fallacy. Just because you've invested time and money into someone, it doesn't mean you should continue with them. Make your decision based on what you know now. Oh god, I'd never thought to use sunk cost fallacy in the context of a relationship, but now you mention it, it might be the main reason so many terrible relationships go on for as long as they do. Food for thought, people. Tighty-whities stapled to her wall as conquests. I've seen it, it's out there. Extra points for rubbers instead of underwear.
Historic documentation.
Talks about all the health ailments she thinks or is convinced she has, and then continues to consume foods which she claims she's extremely allergic or intolerant to that are wreaking havoc on her health. And holy frick, as I was typing this, a text from her came in telling me about some random health ailment. When she goes through your drawers when you're sleeping. Oh, my cat used to do that. I used to always wake up to socks all over my bedroom and have no idea why, until one time I woke up in the middle of the night to see my cat systematically taking socks out of my sock drawer and then discarding them somewhere else. I think you should start seeing a different cat. This one sounds really toxic. Outright refusing to believe that a guy might not be into her advances. I've seen a woman stare in bewilderment at her boyfriend after he had to repeatedly remove her hand from his groin because she couldn't comprehend that he didn't feel like getting felt up in a public area. I've also had a woman, middle-aged, throw a tantrum because I wouldn't buy her a drink when I, 22 at the time, was at a bar, while I was with my parents and some visiting family members. I worked at a resort hotel as a younger man. Older women would legit put their hands wherever they wanted on the staff and think it was hilarious, but if you got upset or didn't gracefully remove your body from their grasp, they would get teed off. Like, how dare you seem ungrateful after I did you the favor of massaging your eggplant while you tried to pour coffee for the table? What the frick is it with people who think they have the right to the bodies of waitstaff? I've seen this way too many times against both genders. It's messed up. I had to leave a party after my grad school graduation because this girl who I couldn't stand wouldn't stop trying to stick her tongue in my mouth. Like, I'd push her away and go to a different part of the bar, and she'd follow me and try to make out with me. After several minutes of me telling her to F off, I just had to leave. 60,000 texts will do it. Not 65,000? What about 69,420 texts? Huh, nice. A girl I befriended in college seemed pretty cool at first, but I quickly learned she had huge attention-seeking problems. I took her to a party where she was all over me. Arm in arm, holding my hand everywhere we went, I wasn't allowed to be alone. When I was talking to another pair at the party, a couple at that, she kicked it up a notch, trying to kiss and be cuddly and whatnot. I was fine with it at the time because, hey, she's nice, she's cute, a little intense, but I could be misreading it. But I certainly was into her. It was kinda nice being the target of someone else's affection like this. After the party, I walked her back to the dorm and she informatively told me not to try anything because she had a boyfriend. Bonus! Same girl a few weeks later told me that if I'd really wanted to sleep with her, I shouldn't have told her I was straight, because she can't help but turn men. A long time ago in the 90s, I was set up on a blind date. The girl knew way too much about me. She knew my brother's names, where I grew up, and other personal stuff you'd have to dig a little to find out about. This was pre-Facebook, and back in the 90s, she would have had to ask people who actually knew me to find out. She was just a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing, so I noped out of that one pretty quick. Later, I asked the people who'd set me up on the date what the heck, etc., and it turns out the girl had this super long crush on me and was reportedly devastated that I wasn't into her. Luckily, I steered clear of that possible Stephen King novel scenario.
It sounds like she should have really just played it cool and asked you about those things on the date.
Yeah, those are all really reasonable questions to ask about a person when you're going on a blind date with them. Save for the sibling's name thing. She should have brought that up in a more natural context. You know, I have to ask the question, is it any better if this person is concealing their obsession and asking a list of pre-prepared questions they already knew the answers to and saving the crazy obsessive reveal for later? I at least appreciate how upfront they were about it. I dated a girl in university that turned out to be severely mentally ill, and we dated for many years as she turned me into a shadow of myself, devoid of self-esteem, friends, and any sense of self. Heed my words or be doomed. She wouldn't like it if I went anywhere without her, or did anything without letting her know. I don't know if it was jealousy or what, but it really angered her, and if I ever went anywhere without her, I'd spend most of my time chatting with her on my phone and trying to calm her down. She would contact me randomly throughout the day to tell me she felt terrible and I had to go and be with her. It didn't matter what I was doing. Usually I was at class or at university or trying to hang out with my friends. It was expected of me to speak very lovingly and tell her I'd be over right away. Even if I went over right away, she would get mad that I didn't sound very happy about it, then fight about that. Or if I said I couldn't do it, she'd lose it at that too. You can't imagine how badly this affected my academic and social life. Even if we were together, I couldn't do stuff that wasn't about her. Doodling in a sketchbook while watching a movie? She'd flip out. Mess around on my guitar while we're lying around in my room chatting? Fury. She hated all women who dressed freely. Girl in shorts? Whore. Girl in miniskirt? Horrible slag. What was weird was that she was a hippie liberal girl with progressive parents, but when it came to other women being in touch with themselves, it was somehow terrible. Didn't have a lot of female friends in general, and if my housemates ever brought girls over to our house, she'd get really insecure. Would have random episodes due to her bipolar, causing her to scream at me, throw crap at me, drive extremely erratically, and just generally treat me like garbage. I was basically linked to her 24/7, either physically or by phone, and if we ever got into any kind of argument, I couldn't just walk away and try to cool off. That would drive her nuts and she would panic even more and pursue me. I could go on about her and her behavior, but these were at least things that were there from pretty much the start. Other things revealed themselves over time. In the end, she broke up with me, which I couldn't believe. At first I was angry with her, but very quickly that anger turned to me. When I think back to how long I stayed with her and how badly she treated me, I feel such hatred for myself for doing that to myself. I was weak. She was broken, but she made me feel like I mattered sometimes, and that was enough for far too long. A girl wanted to date me, and she told me how she climbed in her ex's second-story window to argue with him. No thanks. When they know more about your errands than what you told her. Extra creepy point if she becomes angry when you deviate from your initial daily plans. Extra creepy points if she starts angrily texting you when you change your plans as your day is unfolding. When she's a colleague from work and she turns up at the gym coincidentally 5 minutes after you've arrived, and she's in a low-cut top and starts laughing and touching your arms and bending over and just generally being weird. Especially when she knows that you have a wife and kids and this 45-minute session is the only peace you get 3 times a week. The second date is to a federal prison to visit her son that's doing life for murder. Later saying the phone she snuck in her hoo-ha made her too sore to do the deed that night. What's the most socially accepted form of self-destruction?
Self-hatred and negative self-talk.
Indeed, sustaining that negative voice in your head all day really breaks down your self-worth and self-esteem. We're all flawed in many little and different ways. Try to be kind to yourself and others, if only for little things. I've been trying to do that for a while now, and it helps, and others will react more positively towards you, as well as helping you get a bit more positive bit by bit. I mean, yeah, but it allows me to go harder in the gym.
I once told my coach at the gym I'm not motivated by hearing "you can do it." I need some old school drill sergeant motivation screaming how worthless I am because I can't get the weight up.
Sleep deprivation. Not many adults brag about the amount of alcohol they drink. At one point, that just isn't acceptable anymore. But so many can brag about sleeping less than the recommended hours. Like it's an achievement to be able to function on too little sleep. No, you're harming yourself, inducing stress to your body.
I have genuine sympathy for people who aren't doing that by choice, though. But if I know they're doing it by choice and trying to brag about only getting 2 hours of sleep a night, I'll just start bragging about how much sleep I'm getting. Slept 9 hours last night and then I had a nap afterwards. I feel great.
Exactly this. I suffered 10 years of severe sleep disorders, and to an extent I still do. Not so quirky anymore when you black out on buses, ache during the walk to work, see pink elephants floating down the lecture room, forget last year's entire vacation, lose relationships, or fail class, because your unconscious self breaks alarm clocks without you even knowing. You don't realize how critical your sleep is to daily function until you've been deprived of it for the better part of a decade.
Just get an alarm clock. B-word, by the time I get to sleep, an alarm clock isn't waking me. I once woke hours and hours after my alarm went off. It was still going off, 3 feet from my face, like a freaking siren, just deafeningly loud. Sleep disorder doesn't give a frick.
Yeah, I have to get someone to wake me up normally these days if I have to be up early. Suffering from depression and anxiety, with my antidepressants making me extra tired, and I've been a lifelong vivid dreamer, again, made worse by meds. I can regularly wake up with all of my alarms still going a foot from my head. Even weirder, I can wake up, turn off my alarms, fall back to sleep and have absolutely no memory of doing it. A couple of times I've actually sent messages or written notes on a post-it note during the night and fallen back asleep. I've literally hallucinated when waking up multiple times. Waking up in the morning, I regularly dream or hallucinate university emails being sent to me, and read emails and reply to messages that don't exist, or just completely make up conversations with people, because I hallucinated and they said something else. At the same time as all of this, I can suffer from insomnia. I basically fall asleep easily when I shouldn't, but only sleeping tablets are helping me to sleep at night right now. People get so mad at me for being late or sleeping through alarms, and I just can't help it. It's not me being lazy. It's not me not caring. I genuinely can't control when I wake up, and my alarm isn't guaranteed to wake me up every time. I didn't wake up and decide to go back to sleep. I just sleep through everything. I'm just not, and likely never will be, someone who can easily wake up in the mornings. Oh gosh, I'm counting my lucky stars that I'm a big sleepy sheepdog of a person who can and will drop asleep anywhere and everywhere and sleep like a log, provided there isn't any special stress going on in my life. Overworking. It's lionized and not just socially accepted. Somehow, 12 or more hours a day in a cubicle has become a badge of honor. Working insane hours takes priority over family and health, at least until you drop dead. In Japan, older, burnt-out salarymen were sidelined to sit in a nicer office and not expected to do anything much but stare out of the window. In some ways, that seems worse than dropping dead.
Give me a nice office, no expectation to complete any task, a computer with internet, and I will mindlessly scroll through Reddit the whole way to retirement.
You'd think. I had this situation, and at first it was great, but after a year I'd come to the end of the internet and was losing my mind. I think if you were working from home it would be one thing, but having to trudge to the office every day to do nothing of value got old really quickly. I finally ended up quitting for a job where I actually get to do something. Get injured on the job in the US. As long as it clearly wasn't your fault, they can't fire you. But they will put you in a room to either do nothing at all or paperwork, and because many places have a policy of no cell phone use, you'll wish you were let go or actually died in the accident.
Alcohol.
Alcohol is the only self-harm that people look at you strangely for not participating in.
And they'll even bully you about it.
Yep, I've never smoked, toked, drank, or did any substances in my life, and it was only ever drinkers that got upset about that at all. Why not? Are you sick? Are you pregnant? What's wrong? On medication? Like, shut the frick up for frick's sake, and let me drink my Diet Coke in peace.
Yeah, I'm on 103 days of quitting alcohol, and the main reason I don't want to tell people is because I'm afraid they'll think something horrible happened. In reality, I'm just getting too old and busy for drinking and hangovers to fit into my life. I've always been so mind-blown at how alcohol is treated in our society, and the bias with alcohol versus other substances. If someone mentions smoking or using other substances, they're usually looked at as lowlives or addicts, and others judge them and act extremely concerned with their health and safety, and say how bad it is to do those things.
And yet, those same people are always the ones who are going out to the bar every night, can't de-stress without having a drink, and always need to be drinking to have a good time. And they don't see anything wrong with their behavior. The amount I've learned in my 20s about how much alcohol truly affects your body is insane to me. Why do we normalize blacking out? You're pretty much overdosing on alcohol. Why do we normalize terrible hangovers? I just don't understand it. Why can people drink until they pass out in a bush and laugh about being blackout, and go to work the next day and never be tested for anything? But someone who smokes green herb on occasion is always at risk of failing a substance test and losing their job. It's crazy. Doom scrolling. Huh? Thanks, agreed. And that's enough Reddit for now. Control F4.
Huh? I see what you did there. You're still on Reddit, since Alt F4 is to force close. Sneaky, sneaky.
Alcohol, by a long shot, to the point where people who don't drink are considered sanctimonious outliers.
This is true. I don't drink and never have done. I'm 27, and honestly, the worst people for criticizing or becoming defensive were my parents' generation. People my age were pretty generally good about it, especially at uni, which really surprised me. But I'm still considered unusual, and many people my age do alcohol-based activities like clubbing, or bottomless brunches or bars, etc. I do think attitudes are changing, though.
I've been sober for more than 3 years, and my friends still routinely ask me, "You still not drinking?" Despite knowing that I quit because I had a problem. It's bonkers. I don't have a problem with anyone who drinks, so please don't have a problem with me not drinking. Besides, now you've got a sober driver and someone to pay attention to your kids when you get completely crap-faced at the beach.
Wondering if you're ugly.
The worst part is that some of the people who think about it the most are completely normal and not ugly, and some of them are even attractive. Maybe self-esteem issues, sadly. I can see how that's addictive. I just scroll through looking at pictures and reading comments for a good hour or so. At first I thought it was just hot women fishing for compliments, and there are some in there for sure. But reading the comments, there's a lot of people that genuinely believe they're ugly when they really aren't. It's quite sad. Mathletes. It's social suicide.
She doesn't even go here. That's so fetch. Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
People have said great answers like overworking, lack of sleep, and perfectionism, but I'd like to add a more niche one: digital self-harm. Looking up things that horrify and scare you, or making you feel insecure, such as an eating disorder encouragement, or incel pages that tell you deserve pain, is a form of self-harm. I've noticed whenever I'm not doing well, I end up going down research rabbit holes about disease, war, horrible historical events, gore, and all that crap. It's interesting, and I justify it because it's interesting, but honestly, it just makes me feel more horrible. Self-harm isn't just physical. Sometimes if you have anxiety or depression, your mind wants something that makes you feel worse because it's trying to seek out a reason why you feel so bad. It's true, once I was feeling like crap, full on having anxiety attacks, and ended up looking up methods of taking my life online. Not to try those methods, just to horrify myself out of my mental state. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. It's such a strange urge. It made so much sense once I realized it was simply my head trying to find a reason I felt so bad, because it was distressing that the reason was simply mental illness.
A lack of sleep.
Overeating.
Overeating and eating an unhealthy diet. It's like the #1 public health problem in America. And yet I see so many stories about over-exercising here instead. There are at least 5 stories further on that are some form of exercising. How is obesity or overeating not higher on the list? Well, maybe the fact that it's not recognized here means that it fits the title. Working night shift. Underrated answer. I worked the night shift for 2 years. I barely saw my wife or my friends or my family. It was hard to function. Things like going to the dentist or the bank became a huge hassle. The crazy swing of getting back on your day schedule for your days off so you can see people, then back to overnights, puts so much stress on your body. I'm a night owl and I function best after midnight. I can relate with your problems for sure. This is the comment I was looking for. Although nights are a lot better to work as they're quiet and you get a lot of money. They are horrible for your mental and physical health though. You barely sleep, barely see your friends and family. You have to constantly cancel things as you're physically not able to go as you're drained away. I'm on year 20 of nights, and no way I could get away with half the crap I do on day shift. Yep, even on my freelancer schedule, I push myself so hard to get all of my work done on a regular 9-to-5 schedule, because I remember what I turned into as a guy who stayed up all night working, and I don't want to go there again, thank you.
not leaving a marriage due to social stigmas surrounding divorce or the otherwise religious implications holding you there. Stop delaying happiness due to what other people's expectations of a good person are. You're not exercising duty by staying in a toxic relationship, you're self-harming. On that tack, there's also getting married. People need to know that it's okay to be alone and not lonely.
I wish more people understood this. I haven't been in a relationship in 7 years and it's by choice. I still do fun things and spend time with friends, but having a relationship just to have someone is not a priority. Meanwhile, my coworkers and people at church keep hinting that the right one will come along soon. Ugh.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Extreme exercise.
Almost every ultra runner I know is an addict that traded drinking or substances for running.
As someone who traded drinking for lifting and then had to learn to moderate that, I've never been less surprised by anything. I'm a food addict, which is part of why I took up ultra running. I guess that's a little better than drinking or substances. I feel bad for any alcoholic taking up this sport, as beer is very much a part of the culture. I dislike beer, so this makes it weird for me. There are even beer mile runs, where you drink as much beer as you can, usually at several stops along the mile. Aid stations will often have Fireball or other shots late at night. Many races are expected to serve beer at the finish line. You can't really get away from it.
I was about to give you crap for saying this, but then I quickly realized you're 100% correct. Training hard and working hard for health and fitness is okay, but there are countless people destroying themselves through exercise, ego lifting, a crappy diet, and performance-enhancing substances. A lot of extreme athletes are actually too fit, with heart rates so low that they're at risk of a heart failure.
Yeah, past a certain point, exercise isn't healthy in the conventional sense. High-level athletes, bodybuilders, and others are really pushing their bodies past their natural limits. Mind you, the huge majority of non-professionals never reach this point, so if anyone's reading these comments thinking, so it's healthier to not exercise? No, that's absolutely not the takeaway. Just do everything in moderation. Spending time on Reddit.
But that's not even socially accepted.
Without using the third-party apps. Plastic surgery. I don't know why we can't admit as a society that social media causes body image issues, that body trends change due to what's seen as popular in that moment. But plastic surgery doesn't fix your self-esteem. Like 90% of the time, cosmetic work gets done due to what you're seeing praised in the media. But when people do it, everyone just responds as long as you're happy. Like, bro, what? That person's body isn't the issue, it's the media. They didn't actually fix anything. That's why so many people who get surgery get it on a repeat basis, because they're never truly satisfied. Sugar.
I need to start cutting it out, as I know that that's why I'm slightly larger and unhealthier than I want to be. But it's so gosh darn addictive, and I hate sweeteners. It's obviously supposed to be addictive, and it works so well.
It's not just you that's addicted, it's the bacteria in your gut. A diet rich in sugars selects for populations of bacteria that crave sugar, and you experience their cravings. Good news is, you can starve them by reducing sugar consumption and replace them with bacteria that prefer other foods. Overeating or drinking. Alcohol, the only substance that you have to explain why you're not taking it. Going through something and going around like nothing happens to you because you're a man. This is real. I was raised by one of those manly men and thought it was how it was supposed to be. Therapy and allowing myself to feel saved my marriage.
Hooch or suntanning, perhaps?
The tanning thing is so weird. I visited my family a couple of weeks ago and they were laughing at me because I put sunscreen on my legs before I went for a hike. They were literally saying, "But we're not going to the beach." Then my mum told me I looked good because I'd caught the sun over the weekend at a wedding I went to. When I said, "Yeah, that's not good, I only had a hat but no sunblock," she told me I should be trying to get a tan. She's well aware I've had multiple precancerous lesions removed from my face, and we're genetically at a very high risk of melanoma.
That's not tanning, that's just getting vitamin D, which is indeed very healthy.
If you do it in a tanning salon or studio, it is tanning. Nail biting.
Yeah, but especially when you bite to the point of pain or bleeding.
I used to do this. I finally broke the habit by keeping my nails trimmed very short and filed. I catch myself every once in a while biting a nail, so I get the clippers out and cut off what's irritating me. Oh yeah, I know an entire family that has had to buy an economy-size box of nail files because if they don't have their nails sanded down to the pink, they'll absently start biting away unconsciously the moment they begin thinking of anything. Crazy.
I also think it's over-exercising. As a child, I frequently hurt myself due to depression and other issues. It's been years now and I don't cut myself anymore, but whenever I feel upset, I will exercise to the point that my muscles will cramp and my body will bruise. When I do this, nobody tells me that I should get help, but instead they compliment me and say how much better I've gotten. It's true I've gotten better, but self-harm differs in so many ways, and this is just one of those ways. If your large muscles are genuinely bruised through exercise, you definitely need help. That can lead to life-changing health problems or even death. Is it really like that, or do you just do extreme workouts randomly and just get super sore because you don't work out regularly? I mean, if I don't do heavy squats for a month and then knock out multiple sets at heavy weights, I can barely sit down for the next 2 days. Watching adult flicks. It depends on who you are though. Some people can enjoy it without getting addicted, but it can ruin other people's lives. It's probably way worse of a problem than most people think, at least as easily available and pervasive as it is.
I remember stumbling across one of those hot games sites back in the early 10s. Embarrassing to say the least, but looking back, it's a miracle I didn't get hacked and had info stolen. Then there's the links to the weird stuff. Stuff that could really put the differences between atheists and Christians aside. People forget that stuff can get really dark and harmful, especially to the dumb hormonal kids who don't know any better. I have the aching suspicion it'll be our generation's cigarettes. I think a lot of people aren't really informed about what addiction actually means. It's not harmful to you if it doesn't bother you in your life in any way. Everything else is just Christian purity bullcrap.
I think a lot of people assume that it isn't harmful if it doesn't have an obvious negative impact on your life, because adult flicks have never been this accessible until maybe 15 years ago. The full effects are not well studied or understood. The main harm that I've read is how it can condition you to expect a very intense degree of arousal, but without any of the other factors that come with doing the deed, mainly things like touch or vulnerability. Again, it isn't incredibly well studied, and the stuff I did read didn't find that degree of conditioning to be widespread.
Social media. Surprised this isn't higher up. It's like self-harm for the mind. It has terrible physical effects as well.
Like hunchback. My brother in Christ, you're saying this on a social media app. Don't throw stones.
Smoking cigarettes. This is the obvious answer, I think. Certainly it would have been in my youth. One of the best things that has happened in the US in my life is the decline in smoking, especially public smoking. Smoke used to be everywhere. Ugh. Getting fat. The source? Me. I didn't have the balls to take my own life quickly, so I aimed to kill myself slowly with cake, chips, and ice cream. Joke's on me though. A few years of hedonism was good for perspective after a stress-induced breakdown. Health took quite a massive hit, but at least I'm still here to recognize that, and the rebuild over recent years has been quite pleasant.
It sounds like you found a way to survive during a difficult time, and you should feel proud of how far you've come, instead of feeling shame for what you went through.
Oh, shame is my whole bit, unfortunately. Toxic self-talk has been a constant wrestle, but a strong routine helps against these things. It's now 4:30 a.m. and I'm about to make my way to the gym. Your progress is awesome. It's really hard to stay away from really unhealthy things. It gets pushed in your face everywhere, and it's designed to make us like it. The same with booze. It's everywhere, although it's super dangerous if consumed too much, just because some very powerful people make a lot of money on this stuff. Good on you for getting better, even with the obstacles.
I used to get my dopamine from ice cream, and now I'm diabetic. Yay!
I banned myself from Ben & Jerry's. It's too gosh darn sweet. Overworking and self-deprecation. Starvation. Eating disorders. Being thin is literally a beauty standard, and it's incredibly unhealthy. Having a dangerously low BMI is just as unhealthy as being morbidly obese. Eating disorders are literally the deadliest mental health diagnoses, in part due to all the comorbidities, and yet people idolize and glorify thinness to an unreasonable degree.
Gym bros and their insane diets that are genuinely just eating disorders. No one actually wants to eat 2,000 calories of plain chicken and rice.
I like chicken and rice. I really enjoy my steady diet based on the same main dishes every day. For me, it was diced chicken breast with salt and some Italian-style dry seasoning, plain rice with a splash of olive oil, and a side of whatever frozen vegetables were cheap at the moment. I'd have oatmeal for breakfast, then 2 big chickens during the day and some eggs in the evening. Day after day after day, the same things. It was great, so efficient and so easy to prepare. I don't bother counting and gym broing anymore, but still chicken rice is something I eat a lot.
That sounds a lot better than just plain chicken and rice. Yeah, efficient and quick meals are very nice.
Chicken and spicy rice, like Nando's style, is my favorite meal, but I cannot imagine a giant plate full of plain and likely unseasoned chicken with just plain rice. I had that when I had bad flu as a kid, and I would never want to eat it outside of that.
Unrestrained consumption of processed food, obsession with reality shows, and an overusage of technology.
Dieting. Not all diets, of course, but 1,000-calorie ones, or diets that completely cut off big food groups, or insane stuff like juice diets, are a straight way into eating disorders. Speaking from experience. Self-sabotage. Not sure if it counts, though. Almost all of the answers are about self-destructive behaviors, not self-harming. Deliberate injury to oneself, typically as manifestation of a mental condition, is self-harm. Things like sugar, etc., aren't self-harm.
Using so-called social media.
Voting Tory. What's the most bizarre medical issue you've seen someone trying to hide or mask?
Do you have any medical conditions? No. What medications are you on? Proceeds to name at least 10 medications. Oh, that's so true.
Do you have any medical conditions, sir?
Nope.
Are you on any medications?
Metoprolol.
So, you have high blood pressure?
No, the metoprolol keeps it down.
Actual conversation I had with the guy a week ago. Any past medical history? Oh, high blood pressure, but that's it. No other history. Nope, that's it. Proceeds to take his shirt off. Sir, what is that huge scar on your chest? Oh, that's from my triple bypass. That's medical history, sir. Anything else you want to add in now? Oh, does CHF and diabetes count? I have those as well.
Elderly people are the worst at this. They'll tell you they have no significant medical history, then when you look at their notes, you find out they've had 3 strokes, 2 heart attacks, and a touch of bowel cancer.
That's why I always go with, have you ever had to go to the hospital or something to that effect? No question is truly foolproof, but that one at least is general enough that you might get more info than you need, rather than less. My favorite. Do you smoke? Oh heavens no!
Have you ever smoked?
Yes, but I've quit.
How long ago?
This morning.
Once took an initial history from a patient who reluctantly admitted he'd had 2 heart attacks in the last 5 years. I started to ask him a bunch of follow-up questions and he got extremely huffy and defensive. It's not a big deal. If I'd known you were going to act like this, I never would have told you.
This happened to me 3 days ago. A guy came in a wheelchair. Do you have any medical issues?
No.
Why are you in a wheelchair then?
Oh, I have a degenerative neuromuscular condition and type 2 diabetes.
In a weird way, I can kind of understand this if he'd been in the wheelchair for a while. I'm missing most of my left lung, and there were times when I answered no without thinking, because to me it's just me and not a medical anomaly. Each time my mum was like,
"What the frick, you're missing a lung."
I can see some poor med student doing a chest x-ray on you and trying to figure out why he can't find your lung while trying to play it cool. So, you've never felt like something's missing? This is hilarious. I'm going to have to ask some of my medical practitioner friends about their most egregious examples. Quitting smoking that morning and not considering yourself a smoker is either a great show of resolution or complete delusion. Not a doctor, but when I was working as a med tech in the ER, we had a 75-year-old male patient come in with an extraordinarily low blood pressure, think 70/40, and a ton of facial and upper body bruising. He was brought in via emergency medical services after the nurses at his nursing home found him on the floor in his room, where notably there was some blood on the wall. The guy wouldn't talk to us regarding why he was there, but was very talkative in terms of pretty much anything else. Sports, the news, etc. We eventually were able to get him talking after 4 hours, and he confessed that he'd wanted to take his own life and had taken the remaining amount of his prescribed nitroglycerin. Used for chest pain, it lowers your blood pressure rather quickly. Nitro is also the active ingredient in dynamite, but the amount in the pills is minuscule compared to what's in dynamite. And he had tried to blow himself up by running into the wall repeatedly. He was a really nice guy that sent a card to us after everything. He was just extremely lonely. Things to do today. Stop by bank and get quarters for laundry. Call brother and wish him happy birthday. Research nursing homes to volunteer at. I admitted a guy for pneumonia, which was odd because he was young and strapping, no other medical issues, and X-ray didn't look quite right. The pieces just didn't add up, so I started questioning him more closely. Do you use any substances? The patient said, "Substances? That's disgusting. I'm no fricking junkie. I've never touched substances in my life." I moved on to other questions and suddenly, "Look, doc, I just want you to know that I might have used white snow once or twice, years and years ago. I just snorted it though. That wouldn't cause this, right? How long ago?" "Like 10 years, maybe longer." "It shouldn't be affecting you after this long." "Well, more like 5. "Years?" Like 5 months ago." This goes on forever until he admits that he just got off a massive binge the day before, where he spent the past 3 days in a hotel with some loose women, smoking crystal non-stop. He finishes with, "But I don't want you to think I'm one of those dirty junkies." "No, I think you're the idiot who lied and was getting treated for pneumonia instead of getting the proper treatment for crystal lung, which is what he had. Here's a tip, I genuinely don't care. I'm not your mother, your spouse, or your priest. Don't waste my time and endanger your health spewing bullcrap. Whatever horrible, twisted thing you think is too shameful to talk about, I promise you, I've seen worse." Not so much bizarre as clever. I tested a patient who should have been positive for opiates, as I prescribed them. We do that too. The urine looked completely normal, but the test came back bizarre. He had an insanely high specific gravity, which means there's a lot of stuff dissolved in his pee. Sample was positive for opiates, but had 0 confirmatory metabolites, what your body turns the medication into. Otherwise, the test was totally normal. It took me a couple of minutes to figure out how this was possible. The patient was selling their pills instead of taking them and didn't want to get caught. They crushed up the pill and put it into the urine. This made the test positive for opiates, but because it had never gone through the body, the testing machine had found no metabolites. I use the case to find the smart med student in the group now. As a former pain management patient, that idiot is why we can't have nice things. My aunt is a family doctor, so patients come to her with symptoms and she directs them towards a specialist based on her diagnosis. One day, an elderly husband and wife came into the office, and when asked why they'd come in, the wife responded, "His foot has been smelling for a while, and I finally convinced him to come and have it looked at." My aunt, not hard of smelling, concurred that his foot stunk. She asked him to remove his shoe and sock. When he removed his sock, the bone from his big toe fell out of his toe and onto the ground. Turned out he had a very bad case of gangrene that had eaten away the flesh of his toe. He knew something was wrong but was stubborn and didn't get it checked sooner. And my big toe hurts now after typing this. Had this happen to me too. A woman came in that was an IV substance user, and all her veins had collapsed, so she used her leg veins and got a massive infection in her leg. It was black when she came in. She had put up with the pain for 6 months. The leg was amputated, but she was kicked out after she was found up shooting up in the bathroom. Terribly sad. My mother, the medical professional of our family, had a 13-year-old girl who was 9 months pregnant, in the midst of labor, dilated to 10 centimeters, and crowning in the emergency triage, swearing until she was black and blue that she was a virgin and that nobody knew what they were talking about. Her mother stood on the sidelines causing a commotion, demanding a real doctor make an appearance. Let's just say when the twins made an appearance 10 minutes later, they were all singing a different tune. I don't understand why people keep denying the undeniable. If your doc tells you that you're about to give birth, insisting on never having done the deed and being a virgin is quite pointless. Not sure of this particular girl's situation, but it's very possible that she actually believed that to be true at the time. It's called pregnancy denial, and it's considered a mental illness, I guess. It's pretty rare though, so I'm inclined to think that adolescents just don't always have proper foresight and she was just trying to stay out of trouble, and so she stuck to her story. She could also live somewhere that doesn't provide proper education on the subject, as that's a risk factor in young teen pregnancy. Alternately, she could have also been under the influence of a substance or persuaded to get drunk and then was taken advantage of. So it's possible that she didn't know, just extremely unlikely. I met a teenage girl with a full-term pregnancy ready to give birth, but her boyfriend insisted that the baby was premature because they only did the deed 6 months ago. After the baby was born, he just said that the baby grew really fast. Sure. Might be better if he never finds out, to be honest. Also, this group of stories feels like it's going to be yet another jaw-dropping example of how nowhere near enough people trust advice from their medical practitioners. A 60-year-old female came in after falling asleep and rolling on a pincushion. She had 3 2-inch needles in her left shoulder on the X-ray. We later found out she had been trying self-acupuncture. My cousin told me about a patient who complained about her teat falling off all the time. She said she'd tried to glue it back on or use skincare creams to have it stick to her chest. Turns out she had, not sure what stage anymore, probably pretty bad, invasive lobular carcinoma. From what I remember, the tumor got so big that the skin was stretched quite a bit. Somehow, that plus friction led to an open, not healing and oozing wound which extended to the outlet valve of her chest. Well, nobody there understood how she didn't go to a doctor or a hospital earlier. Keep in mind this happened in Germany. She had a job, health insurance and everything.
My cousin's teat fell off. She didn't have cancer, it was just a botched bosom job.
A friend's teat fell off after a reduction of her chest. She was out shopping the day after the stitches were removed and it literally fell off in her bra. She jumped in her car and sped to the doctor's office. A cop pulled her over. He didn't buy her story at first, then she showed him. He gave her an escort to the hospital. Internal medicine ward outside of New York City. 55-year-old lady was mute in the ED. Noted poor historian, but severely constipated, severe abdominal pain, needed rectal disempation, and more than just an acute workup, so gets admitted reluctantly to surgery. Next morning on rounds, she's talking a mile a minute, full-on detail about her diet and symptoms and family. Afternoon, back to mute and back to abdominal pain and constipation. 2 more days, same pattern. The team is stumped. She is blown away that we can't figure out what's wrong with her, and we feel the same way. Labs, imaging, consult teams, all coming up empty. Strict ins and outs, strict dietary restrictions, everything we can think of. The janitor comes in by chance and he's teed off that he has to change the paper towels so many gosh darn times in this one room. Seems like the whole floor is stealing them from her. Sure enough, patient has been consuming about 2,500 paper towels every 24 hours. The psych team comes in for the obligatory consultation, and of course she's mute. How do we get her to talk? 1 paper towel at a time. I think some poor intern got a paper out of that case. Hope she's doing well somewhere.
I'm surprised surgery didn't figure out where the paper towels were going before the janitor.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Nurse here. One time I had a patient come in with insane intestinal trauma. Had to have his colon stitched up. Said he was fishing and fell. His rectum just happened to fall perfectly on a fishing pole. Must have been a wild night to be fishing in the buff. 1,000,000 to 1 shot, doc. 1,000,000 to 1.
Yes. Yep. Undressed and fell on it injuries are an under-recognized problem. There should be a public health campaign about them.
Too many people have gotten out of the shower, slipped and fell onto a box of cucumbers they kept in their bathroom. Not a nurse, but my mum works with nurses who have crazy stories. Here's 2 of them, both from ER nurses. A man came into the ER with a birthday candle in his wang. He'd stuck it in there to surprise his girlfriend on her birthday, but when he lit it, the melted candle wax stuck to him. And this is probably the weirdest one I've ever heard. An old woman came into the ER with a high fever, abdominal pain, dizziness, and a few other symptoms. She's showing signs of toxic shock syndrome, like when you leave a tampon in too long, so the doctor decides to check the woman to make sure nothing got stuck up there. Sure enough, she looks up there and half craps her pants when she sees 2 beady little eyes staring back at her. The doctor begins to pull it out, to which the old woman responds, "Put it back." Turns out the old woman, well past menopause, had gone to a bad witch doctor to get her help to get pregnant. The doctor's recommendation? Put a now dead turtle up there for a few days and she'd regain the ability to get pregnant.
I don't think anything can outdo the turtle story, and I think I'm done reading these stories.
Agreed. The story writer did good here. That turtle one will hurt me forever. I almost spewed at the turtle story. What in the name of Cthulhu? Agreed. Let's chalk another story onto the Made the Narrator Contemplate His Existence board.
From a nurse friend. A guy came in with burns to his entire Johnson. He tried to say he got it by trying to shoplift a hot barbecue chicken from a deli down his pants. What he was really doing was doing the deed with the chicken. Not sure if this counts as hiding, but a patient we recently had tried to play off a rampant staph infection as just some leg swelling. Turns out that what he meant by that was that he'd had a horrible infection in and around his manly bits. Something known as Fournier's gangrene. Do yourself a favor and don't Google that. The swelling had gotten so bad that his eggplant had literally inverted. He later told us that he had to pee with a 5-gallon bucket held up to his crotch because he no longer had any idea where the pee was going to go.
Since you're wondering, he went to emergency surgery within hours, which is likely to be the first of many surgeries. The only way to get rid of an infection like that is debridement in the OR, plus a crap ton of antibiotics. Somehow this guy had no systemic signs of infection, like fever or low blood pressure, etc., so thankfully he should pull through. Last I heard, he was likely to lose one of his testes, but I don't believe they were going to have to remove his whole Johnson. I know it's fun to talk about how gross this stuff is, but it's a very serious type of infection. This guy's life was definitely in danger, and thank goodness he didn't wait longer. I mean, I think I would have gone to the hospital long before I found out my eggplant could invert. I think mine just did invert reading this story. I've been sitting here for 5 minutes trying to find the ways to properly convey my horror. Oh my god, I don't even have a way. I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, they don't mean inverted, right? It's probably not what I'm imagining. Except, I'm pretty sure it is what I'm imagining. I'm not sure I want you to confirm. You know what it looks like when a turtle retracts its head all the way into its neck skin? It was like that, but with pus. It's an image that will haunt me till my dying day. This only happened a couple of days ago, and I feel the need to share this heavy, disgusting burden. I'm a pharmacist, and a patient came up and asked me if there was gluten in white snow, because she has a gluten sensitivity. I suppose maybe someone, somewhere tried to cut white snow with flour. Still ridiculous, but I imagine she was quite serious. I actually have celiacs, and when I was in Amsterdam, I couldn't find gluten-free edibles. When I interned in the OB-GYN department, we had a lady sent to the ER due to bleeding in her hoo-ha. When she was examined, she had a massive tumor there, the size of a football, growing between her legs. Her husband was with her. Both said that it had just appeared, and they had never noticed it before. There was absolutely no doubt that the thing had been growing for months. Sometimes, when in shock, people can be in denial of the most absurd things. I work in the lab, and the pathology department gets the foreign body items removed from a patient's body after surgery. Recent one was a chorizo sausage. Glad I wasn't there that day. A patient came in with chest pain, said they'd fallen and hit their chest on a table. X-ray was performed to evaluate for a rib fracture or a collapsed lung. The X-ray instead showed a long metallic foreign body in the left part of the chest within the heart. When questioned further, the patient admitted to lying and that they'd actually shot themselves in the chest with a nail gun. The wound wasn't bleeding, nor really noticeable. They were taken to the operating room and did quite well after open heart surgery. Not a doctor, but an EMT. I had a guy who tried to tell us he fell while playing softball and hurt his ribs and arm. This was 10 o'clock at night. Came to find out he tried to screw his substance dealer out of some money, and the guy chased him down with a bat and beat him with it. So I guess he was kind of playing softball. Now that is breathtaking. Disguising your vicious beating as a trip and fell scenario is a bold move. Repeatedly falling onto the same bat all over your body is an incredible feat of clumsiness. Nurse here, and I'm late to the game. I've seen some serious crap, but in this story, the patient tried to hide something, and I paid for it as well. Was working at a teaching hospital here in New Orleans as an agency nurse. Some of my fellow agency nurses can confirm when the staff nurses find out an agency nurse is coming in, we get the patients that the other nurses don't want to deal with. In essence, the crappiest patients on the floor, literally and figuratively. I got my reports and was walking rounds with the nurses going off shift. We walked by a patient's room and he wasn't there. Outgoing nurse says he's always going down to smoke, and that he's very demanding. He was a homeless patient there for an infected arm from IV substance abuse. I asked the nurse why he was being allowed to leave the floor regularly with an IV in his arm, and she just shrugged. About an hour later, my patient finally reappeared and shuffled into his room. I make a mental note to go into that room next for my assessment after I'm finished giving another patient their meds. I go to walk in and the door is cracked. I hear snoring, so I'm knocking, and as I open the door I say, "Hello, Mr. Addicted to Smack. I'm Sherry and I'll be your nurse today." He doesn't flinch. I know he's not dead because I could hear him breathing. I place my arm on his arm and gently shake him, and the guy comes out of it screaming like a wild bear, waving his arms, cursing, and flings a bag of white powder he's holding right at my face. I hit the code blue button because I'm legit terrified. The guy is freaking the frick out, and I look like Frosty the Blowman with a yet unidentified white powder in my hair, on my face, and shoulders of my scrubs. The code team runs in with a crash cart, sees me, sees freaking out patient, and grinds to a halt. Someone runs out and calls security, and a big fella of a respiratory therapist pins the guy down. Security runs in and handcuffs him to the bed. The nursing floor manager starts grilling him about the powder, and I hear him start insisting that it's baby powder. And I scared him while he was cleaning up, and he threw it on me. That's really the last coherent thought I had. I came to in the ER and got the story from the doc after all the security footage was reviewed. The guy was going downstairs, meeting his supplier and bringing the goods back upstairs, cutting his supply more with hospital-supplied baby powder that he'd been requesting for chafing, going back downstairs and having his customers meet him in the ER parking area. He had passed out after shooting up into his IV in the parking lot, and I came in and scared the crap out of him. He had thrown a baggie of smack and baby powder in my face. My husband had to come and get me, and I was given a note in case the agency tested me in the near future. I also had to give a statement to the police. It was simultaneously the best and worst day at work I'd ever had, and subsequently the last hospital shift I've ever worked. In conclusion, worked as a floor nurse, patient threw a bag of smack and baby powder in my face. I got messed up. Patient was arrested. A case of teenage pregnancy where Madam Mama was present. Patient was presented with amenorrhea and fatigue initially. Patient became visibly annoyed when the first test suggested is a pregnancy test. The patient and her mother insisted that she had never done the deed with anyone. Angrily, if I might add, even when the test results came back as positive.
No, you quack. I'm telling you she never done the deed.
Nurse here. I had a patient come in for a hip fracture. While helping her to the bathroom for the first time, the CNA noticed something hanging out of her hoo-ha. Turns out she walks around with a prolapsed uterus and thinks nothing of it. My late father was a surgeon and, when he was a resident, had a middle-aged male patient come in complaining of pain in the rectum. They examined him and found a toy lodged fairly deep. When they asked him how it happened, he looked extremely surprised that it was there and then explained, "I was lying in bed and it was on and vibrating on the bed near me, and it sort of moved on its own. I guess it found its way up my butt all by itself." Loved hearing emergency room stories from my dad, and it sucks that he's not around to tell them these days. There should be a sign up in the ER that says, "The sooner you fess up to cramming whatever it is up there, the sooner we can get it out. You won't shock us." No, really, try us. 911 operators. What's the strangest, serious emergency you've heard? I answered the phone and gave my usual, 911, do you need police, fire, or ambulance? And the person on the other end just started screaming, "Bees! Bees!" I assumed that the bees were neither mugging him nor on fire, so I put it through to ambulance because what the frick even?
And now there's coffee all over my desk and my supervisor is looking at me weirdly. Thank you.
911, what's your emergency?
There's a pig in the road. A big one.
Sir, where are you?
At the stoplight. It's the biggest gosh darn pig I've ever seen. Get someone in here now.
This is in a one-stoplight town and the bar is near the intersection. How big is the pig?
About the size of a Volkswagen.
How much have you had to drink?
I'm not frickin' drunk. It's a giant pig the size of a small car. What is wrong with you people?
The officers showed up to find a full-grown hippo that had escaped from the local wild animal park. It was a big, frickin' pig, I guess. FYI, this was at 2:30 a.m. when the bars closed. I get a lot of calls from elderly people hallucinating because of UTIs. One woman had been following CPR instructions, and when the crew arrived, she was doing very gentle chest compressions on her slightly confused but very much alive cat. Wait, UTIs can make you hallucinate? Mostly in older people, weakened immune systems and all that makes it worse. The emergency itself wasn't particularly strange, bleeding in the hoo-ha during pregnancy, but I did get to listen in on the following exchange. So she's bleeding now?
Yep.
Where's she bleeding from?
Her bottom part.
Which bottom part, sir? I need you to be specific.
Her rectum. Front part.
Her what? Sir, is she bleeding from the rectum or from the front?
Gosh darn it, she's bleeding from her hoo-ha hole.
I think it's impossible to read that last line without a heavy southern accent.
I once had a radiologist refer to my groin as my private area. Like, dude, you're a medical professional and I'm 30. I can handle you saying the correct medical term for my junk. And ironically, to post that story on YouTube, I had to not use the correct term while writing the script. Oh, the strange ironies of online storytelling.
We had a lady who would call all the time about people in her yard or on her house, usually doing nasty things, and it was always a false alarm. The lady had been calling since way before I got my job, and even now, after I've switched agencies, she's probably still calling. She's mental, but not a danger to herself or others yet, so no real need to commit her involuntarily. Well, one day we get a call from her about a man at her house causing the troubles to her. My supervisor, who'd answered the call, finally got fed up and asked to speak to the man. To everyone's surprise, the woman handed the phone over to the man, and there was someone there. It was her brother, and he was trying to get her committed. We ended up, I believe, asking him to leave the property because he couldn't have her committed against her will at the time. It just goes to show you that crazy doesn't always mean wrong. A family member who was working at an emergency room said the following case came about a month ago. A guy got high on angel dust and suddenly thought to himself, I'm a bit hungry and I'd like to have some eggs. Proceeds to cut out one of his testes and fry it in a frying pan. His girlfriend walks in while he's doing that and goes, "What the hell?" At which point he's like, "Oh, whoops, sorry," and tries to put his fried nut back inside the purse. Then he was in the hospital. I don't know the result, but I can guess.
This made my balls shrivel up into my body, and I'm a female. Jesus!
I've got one for you. Not 911, but it'll tie together. So I worked for an alarm monitoring company. I got an inbound call in the middle of the night from somewhere in Philadelphia. The guy on the line sounds really out of it. Drunk, maybe? My first thought that it was someone calling in to cancel a false alarm. Messed up voice was them waking from sleep, not uncommon. Some alarms start going off in my head. The guy wasn't making a whole lot of sense, and it's really hard to get basic information out of him. Eventually, I pieced together that he's a gas station worker and he's been shot. For some reason, he dialed the alarm company instead of 911. We weren't even his alarm company. There was probably an old sticker in the shop somewhere, so I've got no info on this guy. Mind you, we don't have any magical reverse phone lookup system, and our systems are locked down, such that we can't access a web browser. Genius, I know. Pulled out my phone, also not allowed, and managed to look up a gas station with the inbound number in Philly. Called 911 and got police and medical out there. No idea how it ultimately shook out. Stayed on the line, keeping the guy conscious and talking until they got there, and then I disconnected. Oh my god. Thank God you were able to help. Did they switch alarm companies?
I mean, in all fairness, that company earned their business after that.
My sister is an emergency medical technician in a small rural town. Apparently there's been more than one call about horses collapsing and hurting their rider or handler with broken arms, legs, trapped under horses, etc. When she was new to it, someone just described it as a collapsed horse, and she thought they were supposed to treat the horse's condition. Emergency medical service responds to a call where a man reported having multiple potatoes stuck up his butt. Not red potatoes, we're talking about these big brown suckers. The kicker was,
I was washing my potatoes in the shower when I slipped and fell, and all of the potatoes went up there.
What? I wouldn't even try to say I fell on it. I know nobody would believe me, and I'd look like a bigger idiot. I'd just own it, and the dispatchers would probably make a little less fun of me behind my back.
See, in a way you're right, but at this point with all these stories I've read, I'd feel obligated to say I fell on whatever it is that's stuck up there. Like, it's just the thing you're supposed to do. I'm not some uncivilized savage. I live in a society with rules and stuff.
My mum was a dispatcher for 20 plus years. The eeriest call she ever told me about was one that started off with no voice, only breathing. She kept asking yes or no questions, working out a system to guess what was going on. Eventually he could talk a little bit and said the person who hurt him was still there. So the officers went in with guns drawn. He'd said the person was there but hadn't specified that they were dead. Turns out the guy couldn't talk because his throat was sliced, which he had done to himself, to make it look like his wife, whom he had just shot, had attacked him first. Did he survive to be put in jail? He did survive. She didn't follow the case too much, but enough to know they figured out how it actually happened. I imagine he got convicted.
Your sentence, "she didn't follow the case too much," is a sign of a true veteran dispatcher. People are always shocked when they ask, "So what happened?" after they got arrested or went to hospital, and I say, I don't really know. I've been dispatching for 17 years, and I rarely follow up on my calls. When the call is over, I'm done with it.
I've been dispatching for 4 years, and I'm adopting a similar policy. Every time I followed up on a call, it's been bad news. CPR instructions to a 14-year-old girl who found her mum in the bathroom? She survived to the hospital but was brain dead. Oof. And I imagine that you only see so many frankly absurd stories in your job before they all start blurring together eventually, like in this job that the narrator does. I got dispatched for neck pain. I got there and found out the couple were doing the deed on a couch when the female heard a large pop in her head, followed by a splitting headache and nausea. We transport and after a CT scan find out that she somehow developed a tear in her arachnoid meningeal tissue. Serious stuff, but humorous and odd. Wow, he almost literally fricked her brains out. Not sure if that makes him a legend or a monster.
A similar thing happened to me. We were in some weird position and I wanted him to pull up on my head. I hear this loud crack and then debilitating pain. We both worked at the same hospital and it was quite embarrassing to have to explain that my boyfriend may have broken my neck while doing some weird stuff. Turns out it wasn't broken, but there was some trauma. I was told by his boss to keep it strictly vanilla for a little while. No rough stuff.
I once dispatched a helicopter for a woman who got gored by a reindeer. Apparently there is a reindeer farm for tourists nearby and she tried to kiss one. My pilot and flight crew laughed at the MOI and asked 3 times for them to repeat themselves. I responded to a man in his whitey-tighties standing on the yellow lines in the middle of the road. Arrived on the scene to find this to be true. The reason he was in the middle of the road was to practice his karate moves on cars. Dispatch was having a hard time keeping from laughing.
This reminds me of the guy I went to college with. He had Asperger's, so his social awareness was not the best, and he would often practice karate moves just outside the elevator door. He was fully clothed, though.
A bloke I knew did the same thing as well, but only when he was high. He would throw kicks and punches while in hallways, on the train platform, and came at you throwing punches to test you. The very first emergency call I took by myself during training. The trainer was hooked into my phone and could jump in whenever. I answered the phone while my trainer was trying to grab a cup of coffee from the machine. Long cords, and as soon as the phone connected there was what sounded like an explosion and people screaming all over the place. Scared the crap out of my trainer, who sprinted back to the desk thinking that I'd just picked up some huge disaster or accident. He took over the call and started asking questions. And it turns out that what we'd heard was just rushing water from a hot water heater that had ruptured and was spewing water all over these 2 girls' apartment, and they were freaking out not knowing what to do about it. Water tip: make sure you know where the water shutoff is and make sure it works. You don't want to find out it's broken when water starts shooting out of your water heater.
We heard a strange noise at my old house. A hot water pipe cracked and leaked for 5 days before I found the source of the noise. 30,000 gallons of water in the bill that month. Luckily, it was the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, so my bill went from 30 to 200 for 1 month. But I'm sure that's the reason the town put notices to conserve water for the rest of the summer. Bonus story: had a similar call a few years later, picked up to a bunch of people being loud, sounding panicked, and talking about someone being locked in a car. I thought it was a child locked in a car, a very high priority phone call for my agency, due to being in Florida and a few recent deaths. So I put the call in as urgent while trying to get anyone on the phone to actually talk to me. But then I hear a door open and someone in the background screams, "It's out! The chicken is free!" And the phone disconnected. Florida. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The first call I took was from a blind elderly male. He called because he had found his son on the floor of the bathroom. The son wasn't responding, so I had the man tilt his head back and listen for breath. Nothing. He said he was warm and had talked with him less than 20 minutes prior, so I guided him through CPR. Compressions only because of the circumstances. He lived in a rural part of our county and we were low on rigs, so we did this for about 12 minutes before help arrived on the scene. EMS goes inside and immediately asks for PD. This isn't unusual. Sometimes loved ones can't or don't want to believe that it's too late, so we go through the motions until a trained eye is there. PD gets there and asks for a detective. This is also not unusual for younger deaths. 2 hours later, and still there, it piques my curiosity. I called the first officer that arrived and found out that the poor man had been doing CPR on his now mostly headless son. He had been taking a nap and his son had taken his own life with a shotgun. It woke him up, but not quick enough for it to register as a gunshot. When I asked him to tilt his head back, he did so by using his chin, which was still there. I think it worked out for the best because he had support there when he learned the truth. And it didn't make my job any tougher, but it definitely made for an unusual start to my dispatch career. I'm the son of the caller. My dad called 911 late one night to report hitting a 6-foot-tall chicken while driving and running off into a ditch.
He had just crashed his car and his voice was a bit shaky on the phone, so the operator asked him to repeat himself a couple of times and then promised to send someone to help. The first cop on the scene got out of his car with a breathalyzer in hand. By the time he got to the back of my dad's car, he was laughing hysterically over his radio, telling people it wasn't a DUI. My dad had actually hit a 6-foot-tall chicken. And that's the story about the night my dad and all the local cops learned about emu farming. Consider me educated that for some reason people apparently keep emus in the United States. I can't imagine what for, but lesson learned. According to Wikipediad, emus belong to a ratite group and have high economic value for their meat, eggs, oil, skin, and feathers. The birds are adaptable to varied climatic conditions. Best memorable call I had was when I was still training. It was a few days into starting to take 911 calls on my own, and my trainer just listened in, and I got a very calm lady asking for paramedics. I asked her for the address and why she was calling. My son cut off his Johnson. I parroted what I'd heard back while mentally I was going, "Excuse me, what?" The lady confirms that her son cut off his eggplant with a knife and there was blood everywhere. Now, the whole room is bustling getting the resources I need for this guy with a knife who is probably bleeding out. I ask her where her son is in the house and where the knife is. When the lady can't really answer my questions, that's when I knew something was up. She has no idea where he is and she never saw him cut anything off. So I ask how she knew her son did this and she replies, "I have visions and revelations. I can see the knife." Oh boy. It becomes a back and forth figuring out who her son is and if anyone's even hurt. The lady even gave a neighbor's address instead of her own. Eventually, we find her son's phone number through associations. The guy is actually just 2 years younger than her and a roommate. So my supervisor hops on the phone and calls the guy and cuts to the chase. "Is this so-and-so? Did you cut off your Johnson?" Spoiler alert, his member was still attached to his body. This was almost 4 years ago, and I still bring it up to curious new trainees when they ask what their strangest case was. Otherwise, the few other calls I remember: a substance addict couple birthing their baby in a bathtub. Child Protection Services got involved real quick on that one. Double homicide. I talked to the teenage girl that managed to run out of the house after an adult roommate shot and killed mum and the teen's boyfriend. The teen thankfully wasn't hurt and ran to a neighbor's house. She vividly remembered every detail and was very calm until officers were with her. She was a stellar RP and was very mature. I'm very proud of her keeping herself collected after seeing everything that went down. I hope her life has turned for the better since then. Someone taking their life on the phone. My first one, an older guy called in from the house phone and very calmly started telling me the address, name, and his date of birth. He proceeded to say to tell his family he couldn't take it anymore and asked us to turn off his front porch light when we arrived. He also gave us next of kin info. I tried talking to him, but he didn't even acknowledge me. He had made up his mind. I heard a metallic bang immediately after he gave me the last bit of his instructions. First, I'd thought it was a metal chair or a step stool falling onto the tile floor. I kept an open line until officers were with him, confirming a self-inflicted gunshot wound through the left temple. The guy had a ton of health problems and just couldn't take it anymore. I can vividly remember the raspy and scratchy sounds I heard during the open line, which I believe were gasps, death rattles, and body twitches. He shot himself outside so his family didn't have to deal with cleanup. And of course, we had no other callers reporting shots fired in the area. My dad works in an emergency room, and one time he had to treat someone who had been attacked by an owl. The owl was unconscious on the side of the road and she thought it was dead. Because she didn't want the children of the school bus to see the dead owl, she decided the best course of action would be to put the owl in the back of her car. Unfortunately, the owl wasn't dead. It woke up and attacked her. My redneck uncle had the same thing happen to him. He hit a deer with his truck and thought it was dead, then put it in the back of the truck. Free venison. The deer wakes up and freaks out. The truck was definitely not unscathed. That happened to my cousin with a squirrel. He thought it was dead until he picked it up. That had to be an embarrassing doctor visit. Okay, so my friend is a former 911 operator and she told me that she got this call from what sounded like an old man. He was telling her that it's been a while and she should come back over, like, "Hey, it's been so long, I miss you. Do you still remember the address? 123 Street, remember?" She assumed that he was just senile or something. Turns out he had someone in his house and he didn't want them to know he was calling 911. For clarification, she did dispatch someone just in case the old man was incapable of taking care of himself, because she thought he was senile and that's how they found out. I feel like as a 911 operator, if you hear cryptic messages like this, it'd be a dead giveaway that someone was attempting to relay the address to you. I hope if I'm ever in this situation, the 911 operator has half a brain and isn't like, huh? What? My soon-to-be mother-in-law got a call that a guy and his roommate were doing substances, smack, and the caller's friend had OD'd. So this absolute mensa hooks up a couple of wires to the inside of a toaster, turns the toaster on, and attaches the wires to his unconscious friend's testes. Honestly, not sure if it actually electrocuted the unconscious guy, but the caller definitely seemed to think it would wake his friend up. My mother-in-law's response? Sir, please don't do that again. Not me, but my cousin. She had this lady who would call often and make up stories, most likely due to loneliness. But they still had to send someone out every time, so one day when they got a call from her, they figured it would be another one of those calls. She said, 911, what's your emergency? Oh, there's a lion in my living room. There's a lion in your living room. What's it doing? She paused to ask us what it's doing. I don't know, just standing there. Can you send someone over? It turned out there was actually a lion cub in her living room that had escaped from the circus or something nearby. The worst part about that story is that you had to take the woman's calls more seriously in the future, and her just leaning over to ask what its intentions were are the cherry on the cake. We got a call from a woman having severe abdominal pains. Simple enough. We asked the normal questions. Are you feeling faint? Are you vomiting blood? Stuff like that. Then we asked if it was traumatic or not. Well, she eventually tells us that she had a tampon stuck inside of her for more than 20 days, and she thinks that might be why she's hurting. Bonus story, I heard someone else's funny story. This guy and his wife were playing around with various vegetables, and the guy gets a carrot lodged up his… You know where he got it lodged up. So they tried to remove it so that they wouldn't have to call 911. She used a pair of burger tongs and grabbed onto something and pulled, but she was actually pulling his intestines. Fun. If you get something stuck, just call 911. I've heard it all before. I don't care that you have a vegetable garden in your rectum, I just want to get you help. Thank you for telling me that second story. I'm gonna go throw up now. Nothing really jumps out to me as my strangest story. I can think of the worst, scariest, dumbest, and most infuriating though. Some of my good ones are people saying they've locked themselves inside their car, someone getting ripped off by a working girl, someone stealing the caller's things. By things, they mean a safe full of green herb. A mugger going around hitting people in the neck with a taser yelling, "Surprise, motherfricker!" in a deep voice and then taking their phones and wallets. So many 911 calls with people essentially calling and getting themselves arrested because they were in the wrong and not the person they'd called the police on. A guy going jogging along the beach and coming back to find his car gone, and while driving him home after taking a report, we drove by it. He'd forgotten where he parked. Trying to let a guy off who was obviously up to some shady stuff, telling him and his girlfriend to just go and rent a room and rethink their lives. They stole the cop's cell phone, he made a call for them because their phone was dead, and ended up having a crap ton of crystal in his car when they caught up to him later. And one guy who got into a fight with a bunch of ducks, started losing, tried jumping a fence, slipping and tearing his ball bag open on said fence. Thinking about it, I do have one. Her boyfriend was bleeding in the shower. I tried to get her to say where and how. She beats around the bush a bit and doesn't come right out. We got the paramedic to tell us afterwards. She's a nurse and they were fooling around. She'd tried to catheterize him while he was hard and ended up puncturing something and they couldn't get the bleeding to stop. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.